Alô? Ok, pessoal, vamos começar daqui a pouquinho, tá? Daqui 3 minutos, 2 minutinhos, nós vamos começar, tá bom? Só aguardando os demais, tá? Ok. Obrigado, pessoal que está chegando. Daqui 2 minutinhos a gente começa. Ok, pessoal, já tô... Daqui 1 minutinho nós estamos começando, já o pessoal está chegando, tá? Nós já vamos começar, então. Qualquer dúvida que vocês tenham, vocês coloquem aí no chat, vocês podem mandar direto para mim, tá bom? Ok. Alright. Ok. Para o pessoal que está chegando, é só informando que nós vamos fazer, a minha ideia aqui é fazer uma revisão, mas do conteúdo, vou focar mais no conteúdo novo de 2023, lembrando que nós já temos, eu já tenho um vídeo postado aí no 2022, em novembro, tá? E I just noticed that some of our guests from the US also are here. So just let you know that I will be conducting this whole video in English, okay? I will be explaining all the topics in English, all right? To satisfy the audience here. We have a broad audience, and since English is the language of the exam, we're gonna be using that one, okay? All right, 8 o'clock, okay. All right, I'm gonna start streaming. Actually, I'm going to start recording. This is going to be posted on the classroom for all the students. All right, let's go. So welcome everyone. My name is Henrique Cezar. I will be conducting the review of the CFA Level I content exam February 2023. I'll be focusing on the changes that happened from 2022 to 2023. Okay? We have change in corporate issuers. We had a little change also in economics. There was added one new reading and a little revision on portfolio management. But I would say the corporate issuers, and derivatives also quite a bit. Okay, so derivatives, corporate issuers, there was the main changes that we had. And in economics, one reading was added, not too complicated, very easy to digest kind of reading, right? And portfolio management, I do have some little changes. Okay, all right. So let me start sharing here with you. There we go. So I'm going to start here, friends, with the content of quantitative method, okay? So quantitative method, we're going to be just addressing few points. There's no changes that happen here, okay, on quantitative method, right? So just the same ones. 1 second here. So I'm going to go covering quick TVM, organizing data, probability concepts, probability distribution, sampling and estimation, hypothesis test, and linear regression. Okay. All right. So just before showing the topics that have not had so much change from one year to another, again, I'm going to cover the points to remind you what I think is important, remind you which kind of questions you could face. Okay. But like I said, I think the idea here is to focus on the topics that have really changed or added or suffer a large update on the readings and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's see here what we have. All right, so let's go. And let's start. All right, friends, I'm going to start very quickly here with the first QM learning module. This is the TVM. That's the use of the calculator, okay? So make sure that you're very comfortable using the calculator. I hope everybody here comfortable with annuities, perpetuities, multiple cash flows that change signs, right? And some rate of returns that might be asked you to calculate here on this reading, okay? So that's the QM learning module 1, right? So very quickly, right? Because again, I don't want to make, the last time I did a review, it took me 5 hours to complete, 5.5 hours, right? The idea of this video today is to complement, okay? Focusing on the changes from 2022 to 2023. So the folks that want to have a more comprehensive review of the learning material, the modules for the CFA Level I, watch the previous video that I posted in November. That video has the content, review content for CFA Level I November 22. And this one here, we'll have the new content for 2023. In other words, if you watched both videos, then you're going to get a very comprehensive review of the material. All right, a couple examples here how those questions would show up for you or could show up. Look at that. In a case of you purchase, you need, you want to finance a purchase, how much would you pay on payments? Sometimes be careful. The payments will the data is going to be given annual data, and the answer was going to be monthly data or vice versa. So be careful with the compounding, okay? I just noticed I'm switching language here. All right, another type of example is the time frame example, like in this case here, that you have a couple, they want to save money for college education of the children, X years from now, they're going to need a total amount in the future, how much they should put aside today, right, to satisfy those needs. So that's an example here, as you see, of a timeline, right? So you put the data here. That's how much the person would need in 4 years. And actually, let me open up a little bit here. There you go. There you go. And a little bit more. There you go. So imagine the person is going to need $25,000, $26,500, $28,000, and $30,000 for 4 years in the future. So first you calculate the future value or of this or the present value of those 4 amounts in the future. And then you bring that total to the present, and then you figure it out how much was the payments that you need to get it today, or equal payments to get that amount in the future, right? So that's a problem with timeline, not very difficult. In this second one here, it's also a problem with timeline. It's in a situation, right, where you're gonna have to reinvest the cash flow that you're getting at a certain rate. Just a couple things to remember. When you get a cash flow 1 year from now and you're going to reinvest the cash flow, you're going to reinvest for T-1, right? So if you have 4 years ahead of you and the first cash flow arrive on year 1, that cash flow will be reinvested for 3 years. So this cash flow here will be reinvested for 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. It's missing a 0 there. And there's no years at all. That's the 700 arrives at the day, that last day of that investment. All right, then you compute it, add it, and that would be the total amount at the end. I want to call your attention for this problem here. This is exactly the steps you need to understand to compute the return on bonds. So I'm going to open the door now, and then I'm going to clarify a little bit more when I arrive in fixed income. When we're doing bond return, right, you receive the cash flow that the bond will pay, and you immediately invest the cash flow on the yield to maturity, if you're able to do that, right? Because seems almost impossible in real life to be able to do so. If you do that, if the investor is able to get each interest paid by the bond, imagine $700 for 4 years that bond is paying, and reinvest that at yield to maturity, well, guess what? The investor will earn the yield to maturity as a return for that investment. Okay, so that's actually an important concept of yield to maturity, a return on bonds. Okay, is the fact that you will only earn the yield to maturity of the bond if you're able to reinvest those cash flows at the yield to maturity as soon as you get the cash flow. Other than that, the return will vary. This could be a question for you, an open question. All right, friends, this is a review for the first learning outcome. Now we're gonna see the second learning outcome here, okay? The second one. Reading number 2, organizing, visualizing, describing data. This one, it's a relatively new reading. It's not the 2023, it's I believe 2021. It's after this wasn't on the previous format of the exams. This arrived during the CBT format, right? Nevertheless, it's I believe it's an important module because there's a lot of things going on here. There's a lot of information. There is definitions. There's a lot of different things going on here. Okay, all right. So it's a vocabulary thing. All right. This calls my attention for something that I had planned to show at the beginning of the lecture, the review today, but I didn't. Then I'm going to show you now. There we go. I want you to take a look on here. Okay, you see, it's an example. I'm giving you here an example. Okay, of a learning outcomes of a reading. That's the module 1. This is written in Portuguese, by the way, for the folks there who are following us. Topics in demand and supply analysis, right? What I'm calling your attention here is the learning outcomes. I think it's super important that you do a review before the exam. You do a review on all the learning outcomes, okay, of the readings. Especially those readings that you're not 100% fine or totally understanding the topics. Take a look on the learning outcomes. This avoids you to study or prepare for something that may not be in the exam. For example, if there's not many or much calculate, right, the words calculate, right, are not there, then don't expect many numerical questions from that module. So there you go. Calculate shows up on the learning outcome A. Then B is compare, C is contrast, D is describe, E is determine, and F is describe. There's only one calculate among 6 learning outcomes. So what is the clue here? The clue is that the module 1, most likely, if there's a question for module 1 economics on your exam, example, demand supply analysis, don't expect a many numerical question here. Okay, you're going to be actually trying to answer questions that will require your understanding of the theory. So try to do that. Try to take a look on all the learning outcomes. See the ones that don't have calculates. You're going to see that there's several modules now with no calculate and no find, no demonstrate numerically, nothing like that. It's just pure determine, explain, and describe. Those are going to be very popular learning outcomes. So, in other words, I expect, and again, that's my opinion, a very conceptual, more like I would say 75% at least in my opinion, will be questions of the conceptual level, not analytical level for your exam. Okay? All right, now let's go back there and do a quick review on reading number 2 or module 2, okay? Organizing, visualizing the data. So, good vocabulary review here for you. What is frequency distribution, contingents tables, what it means by visualization of the data, right? What is a central tendency, or what are the central tendency measures? Quintiles and quartiles, measures of dispersion, little bit of skewness and kurtosis, and correlation. This is all important things to know. At least you should read it and feel very comfortable with what each one wants to say. Okay? I always tell the folks reading the official material to take a look on the highlighted words during the material that you're reading. Those highlighted words means that you should know what they mean, right? I'm not saying they're going to become a question, but they could be in a question, right? Not a question about that word that's highlighted, but actually a question with that word that's highlighted that can make a totally difference if you have no clue what the word or that expression means. So that's important. And that goes more for those folks that speak English as a second language. You should really do this comprehensive work on the highlighted words. Okay? All right. I divided here by learning outcomes, okay, to give an example. So the learning outcomes A and B of module 2 of QM will talk about visualization and organization of data, okay? So let's see what they mean, what is important here. So the first one is just an example of a contingent table. A contingent table is where you organize the numbers, so the reader can have an idea what's going on here. Right? So for example, I have portfolio manager performances here. I have higher, expected, and lower. And then I have the name of the managers. And I have here the number of portfolios that had higher, expected, or lower performance. Right? Then those are the totals. So that's how you read it. Right? You can see. Although this data is a little bit difficult to interpret at the moment, right? I did that on purpose to show it to you that we're going to need something more than just organizing the data in a table. It here is hard to read because the more managers I include and the more performance standards I put it here, it becomes a little bit difficult to take a look on the data and understand what they say. So that's why we need to organize the data, right? So let's organize the data, and with your permission, I'm gonna remove myself from the screen at the moment so you can see this whole table there. There you go. So look at that. We have here an example of what we call the frequency distributions, right? Of data. So I want you to see that we have the absolute distribution, the cumulative distribution right there, okay? I don't know if this one is there, but there shouldn't be. There you go. So absolute, there we go. Cumulative distribution and the relative distribution. It's very easy, right? Absolute distribution, just add the number of observations per group. Those are called bins. Being 1, being 2, being 3, being 4, being 5, and this is the entire population because it goes from higher than 20 and lower than 5%. That includes all the possible returns. That's an entire population. Then observations, absolute observations is exactly how many times this shows up. Cumulative distribution is the accumulation of bins. So it starts with the number 1. Then the probability, then the number one you added with the number of the second ones, and you get the total cumulative here. Then you get the third one, the cumulative, all the way until the total number of observations. And the relative is very simple. You take the absolute and you divide it by the total, and you get the relative. Understand that the relative distribution is much easier to understand. Look, this is more meaningful, right? The returns lower than 5%, 22% chances of appearing. It returns higher than 20%, 9% chances of appearing. This is much easier to read than this table here, where the data is just raw. Okay? So that's to explain the importance of organizing data. All right, friends. The second learning outcome we have here, and now I will be back. There we go. There we go, and I'm back here, thank you. So now we're gonna just take a look on how to organize the data in a visual format, okay? Because I said to you, sometimes if it is the raw data, it's too complicated, you can't. So you can use histograms, bars charts, word clouds, line charts, tree maps, and heat maps. Make sure that you know how they look like, because maybe you could get such an easy question, right? Saying to you, what type of data visualization is that? Or if you want to organize certain type of data, which would be the best way to do so? Right? So here we have some examples for you. We have the histograms here. We have the bar chart. We have some word cloud here. Right? We have a tree map there. We have a scatter plot right here. And we have the heat map. Okay? Like I said, it would be good if you know how to read what's written here, but more than that, just know that they exist and when they will be more applicable. That would probably be my take on which type of questions would be. All right, let's continue here. LOS G and H of QM, module 2, is measures of central tendency, which you're going to be seeing more of this in future modules, like module 3 and 4. We're going to be big about means, average, and so on and so forth. Make sure you know your arithmetic, geometric, and harmonic. Make sure you know when to use or why, what the difference between them. Always remember the arithmetic is always the highest of the three. The most they're gonna be are equal, but arithmetic is usually higher. Not too much, but a little bit. A harmonic is used for outliers. So when you have an outlier or possibility of huge outliers, or that's going to disrupt the analysis, then use the harmonic. That's kind of minimize the effect of outliers. Make sure you know the difference between arithmetic and geometric means. It's important. And here's a little bit of some of the formulas, right? That if I have two numbers and I need to arithmetic average, I just add the numbers divided by 2. If I need the geometric, I multiply the numbers and I take to the exponent of 1 divided by the number of observations. In this case, I have 2 observations, is 1 divided by 2, which is the square root. Harmonic is just the number of observations, right? That's actually the inverse. It's pretty much almost the inverse of the arithmetic. Okay. All right. The new component that came 3 years or 4 years ago, it started. The quartiles, quintiles, deciles, and percentiles. Deciles and percentiles, the same thing. Make sure you know how to read this that I'm highlighting here. Make sure that you know how to read it, okay? Because you might get one of these with a bunch of numbers, and then the question will be, on the image above, what would be the median? Right? What would be the upper quartile? What would be the lower quartile? What would be the quartile, interrange quartile? Interrange quartile, which will be the lower quartile, or the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. You're going to get a range there. Okay? This is called the box and whisker plot. Make sure you know how to read this. Okay. Now an example, very quick. Again, the idea is not to spend much time on the material. There has been already a review on the previous video I posted in November, right before the exam, November 22, Level 1 exam. All right, friends, here you might get something like that. I don't know, but if you do, you need to know what to do here. So you're going to get the bins, right, B-I-N. You're going to get the lower bound, the upper bound, and then you might get a bunch of questions, or one question, or maybe 2 questions related to this. You need to know, okay? Because the idea is you want to maximize the chances of getting 75% of the exam. Why 75? Because that's my number. I believe that if you get 75% of your exam correct, you pass the exam. So we're talking about here missing 35 questions, no more than that, okay? So the more number of questions you get it right, obviously, right, you're going to maximize your chances to achieve that 75%. Could it be 74? Yes, it could, but 75, it's more safe to think about, right? So you can miss about 35 questions and you still pass that exam, but you want to maximize the chance to get it, the easier ones right, or the short questions right. Don't take more. If it doesn't, if you know the answer, it's going to take you 10-15 seconds to answer. That would give you extra time for the difficult questions, right? All right. How do we do the percentiles? Well, you divided the beans in groups, and then you have like 10 groups of the whole data. 10 groups in this data. I have 20 beans, so I only need to do is select it 2 by 2, right? And then each 2 beans is 1 decile of the whole population. Right? What is a third quintile? So all you have to do is divide it in quint is 5. Divided this in groups of 5. The whole organization, the whole population, will be divided in 5 groups. Who are they? Well, I have 20 numbers here. So if I take 4 by 4s, look at that. This is my first quintile. And look my last one here. Okay? This one is my last. So that's my 5th quintile, my 4th, my 3rd, my 2nd. Okay? Same logic for quartile, friends, but quartile, you're going to divide this whole thing in 4 groups. So the 4 groups will be all the way from 1 to 5, and then 6 to 10, 11, 15, 16, 20. That will give you your quartiles. And what is the median? The median is the number right in the middle, the median, right? So I have 20 numbers. The median will be between 10 and 11. How do I compute the median in this case? Well, you're going to have to use a linear interpolation to find it, right? Or you're going to have to use it a little bit of common sense. I'll explain in a sec. Interquartile range, friends, you locate the second and third quartile. Second and third quartile. So let's see, quartiles are 5 and 5. I start with number 6 here. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Look at that, right? This is my second quartile. Now I'm gonna take my third quartile. Let me do that. Let's put a little color here. Now let's take the third one that goes 11 to 15, right there. Boom, there you go. And then what do? I need the interquartile range. So if you remember what I said before, you take the upper bound and minus the lower bound of the range. What is my range? My range goes from 14.78% as the lowest to 62.16% as the highest. This minus that is your interquartile range. Okay? We never know. You could get a question like that. It is easy, yes. If you know the definition, it's quite easy. All right. Another question you might get on this, related to this, will be finding a position. So imagine that you have like 200 numbers, right? Where do I find the fourth quintile here, for example? Right? Which is that? Right? What exactly it is? So first step, you have to think in decimals here, in percentage. So the fourth quintile, right, represents 80% of the population. Let me actually get myself out. No, I'm gonna do differently here. There we go. And I make that for you. There you go. So look at that. Fourth quintile means 80%. Right. So who is the being? Now what is the observation that's in that position, the 8%? Right? So you're going to use this little formula here, the locator formula. It's n plus 1, with n being the number of observation, times that 80%. So here I have 20 observations, plus 1 is 21, times 0.8 gives me 16.8. Then what do? You locate the position 16.8, which will be between 16 and 17, right there, right? And then you have to figure it out what is the amount or the values that will be correspondent to that location. Well, a little bit of common sense to do here, friends. Look, if I'm looking for the 16.8, it's very close to the 17, a little further from the 16. So look, take a look on the numbers between the lower, let's take a look on the lower bound. The lower bound for the 16 is 65.05. The lower bound for the 17 is 70.07. So obviously, if I'm looking for the position 16.8, that's something very close to the 17, I'm looking for a number that's like probably around 69, right? 69 will do it. And here, if I have 72, and here I have 69, right? So probably I would have here, right there, would be, this is the 7, about 70, 69.9 or something like that. So then you look in the alternatives, which one would fit right there, right? And then you answer the question, okay? It's simple as that, right? I don't anticipate you having to do the linear interpolation, but if you have to do linear interpolation, well, linear interpolation, you're going to have to kind of isolate it, the 16, and take the 0.8, multiply by the difference between the bounds, and then add on the value that corresponded to the 16. Okay, I'm not going to go in details here because I think it's low chances to be in your exam, but there's very well explained this concept of linear interpolation on the readings, okay, of with the learning module number 2. All right, friends, let's finish this review here for learning module 2 and start learning module 3. Measure the dispersion. Make sure you understand what is deviations, what are errors, right? So we're like talking about the mean, right, minus the observed. So the average, that's what I expect, minus what I observe. If there's any difference between the observation and the expected value, you have deviations. those deviations, they're going to be above the expected value or below the expected value. That's what we call the downside deviation, when they are below, okay? Don't forget the formula of coefficient of variation, which is standard deviation divided by the mean. It's important. I think it has a tendency to show up, okay? All right, let's see here. Excuse me. Let's talk about normal distribution. Not much about normal distribution. Normal distribution is on learning module 3, but on this one here, you need to know more about skewness and kurtosis. What is that? Well, skewness is when the normal distribution is not in the center, right, of the axis. And so you're going to be a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. It's your job to know when is a positive skewed, when is negative skewed, right? And understand that when it's positive skewed, the mean is higher than the median, is higher than the mode, okay? The mean is higher than the median, it's higher than the mode, okay? Now, when is negative skewed, right, then you're going to have the mean lower than the median, lower than the mode, okay? So that's the difference. That's what happened when we have the skewness, positive or negative. Another point that's important to remember is the concept of kurtosis. Kurtosis, okay? Kurtosis means that, well, let's think about this. I think I have an easier way to put for you. Kurtosis is not a problem. Excess kurtosis, positive or negative, is a problem. So kurtosis means that a kurtosis of 3 means that you have the normal distribution. So what is the 3? The 3 means that if you go 3 standard deviations to the left, 3 standard deviations to the right, you cover 99% of that distribution. Wow, that's good. That's normal distribution. But if the distribution it's not normal and has kurtosis, let's say has excess kurtosis, let's say kurtosis the 3.5, for example, it's very logical here. Look, imagine that instead of going 3 deviations to the right and 3 deviations to the left to cover the entire curve, you're going to have to go 3.5 deviations to the left and 3.5 deviations to the right to cover the entire curve. So this means you're going to have more outliers. You're going to have fat tails in that distribution, right? You're going to have the probability of extreme negative numbers arriving. So all those problems that kurtosis can bring. So make sure you understand what is kurtosis, what kurtosis of 3 is okay. Kurtosis of 0 doesn't mean, is actually bad. Kurtosis of 3 is what we're used to. Okay? Anything different than 3 could cause a problem. You need to know what it is. Okay? Problem for the observation, we're going to try to, if you use the normal distribution, you can use this for hypothesis test. You can use this for, maybe even for linear regression in some cases. So again, it's important that the data follows the normal distribution. Otherwise, it's not going to be a good prediction. It's going to be useless for the financial analyst. All right, just those Greek names here, just in case. Platykurtic, it's for kurtosis that's excess kurtosis is negative. Mesokurtic is the normal distribution, and leptokurtic, it's the one that has the longer tails, right? The one that's kind of like high excess kurtosis. All right, approaching here to the end, friends. Don't forget correlation. Correlation is important, right? Correlation in covariance. Make sure you know how to go from covariance to correlation and from correlation to covariance, okay? Because when you arrive in portfolio management, that's going to be important, okay? All right, problems. Yeah, I have one example here, and then I move on to the review of learning module 3. The tree map is best to show what? Right? That's a question, right? That could show up. And instead of tree map, is the heat map is best to show what? Right? The word cloud is best to show what? So we never know which type of questions you're going to get. So I choose this one to emphasize that it's possible that you're going to get one line question. This is a half a line question. 3 short alternatives that you either know or you don't know, right? That's it. By the way, the difference here is, well, you can do by exclusion. Sometimes, pay attention here. It's possible that you could find the answer by eliminating the ones that cannot be, even if you don't know the right answer, but you know that there are 2 there that cannot be. So I strongly believe that this is a technique used to create alternatives for questions. Okay, it's creating a difficult question, but putting there some kind of alternatives that will give you a clue and they're more interested to know that you know the clue that the answer is given to answer the question rather than know the question itself, right? I think that would be, for a financial analyst, showing those skills it's more valid for us, right? It's more important for the job, someone that can exhibit this type of understanding, right? The common sense, as we call it. The answer here is a tree map is best to demonstrate, to show value difference of categorical groups. Because underlying trends over time is the line, right? It's a line chart, and joint variation of two variables will be better with the bar chart. All right, friends, I'm moving on now to 3. Okay, if you have any questions, you can ask me here on the chat, and I'll be able to answer. Right? Yeah, I think that's fine. So far, nothing. Okay. Joint probability, conditional probability. You need to memorize those formulas. They could show up there in a very easy question. Okay, that's learning module 3, probability concepts. Okay, so if it's independent variables, how do you do the probability, right? This is actually supposed to be OR. Okay, the probability of A or B happen is the probability of A plus the probability of B. But if A and B are dependent, well, then the probability of A or B is the probability of both minus the probability of the combined, both at the same time. Okay, so those little ones, if they show up in a question and you don't remember, well, that would cost you a question. All right. I do not expect you to have to compute the standard deviation of any sample. I found this is like, for A, the calculator can do for you. The calculator will not be able to do it if the probabilities are different. And it's time consuming. Look at this, I just put here for you to see it, right? If I have those 3 different assets, those 3 different expected returns, those 3 different probabilities or weight, well, then I'm gonna have a standard deviation. I have to do one by one. So again, I think it's too time consuming. I would not expect a calculation of standard deviation on your exam. Covariance and correlation, I already mentioned. Make sure that you know how to go from one to the other, and I put it here. The correlation of A and B, it's equal to the covariance of A and B divided by the standard deviation of A times the standard deviation of B. Okay. You also have something called the covariance or correlation matrix. I put this formula here just in case. It's the number of unique covariance or correlation that you can get in that table. It's n times n minus 1 divided by 2. Okay. I doubt it. This could be there, but we never know. I'm trying to cover all the angles here for you. Base formula. That one it has more chances. That one has definitely big chances to be in the exam. Okay. It's a classic formula in finance, especially in probability. We use a lot in finance classes, this one. Okay? Probability of something happen given that something else has happened. Okay? So probability of A given B is probability of B given A times probability of A divided by probability of B. Okay? You need to memorize this formula. Okay? Even if it doesn't show up on the exam. Okay? Because it's something that we never know. It's possible. It's very possible that you face that there. Okay, go practice 3 or 4 examples, because sometimes they might ask you they give you the probability of the event given the information, and they might ask you what is the probability of the event. So you're gonna have to replace it, right? You have to replace it on the formula to find it what you're looking for. So be careful. Okay. Finishing here, learning module 3 with combinations and permutations, make sure that you at least know what it is, right? Combination, the order doesn't matter. Okay, the order doesn't matter when you computing the number of outcomes, and the permutation, it's when the order matters, right? So you need to be careful on that. So I'll give you a quick example here. If we're looking for how many possible combinations we can get if we let's say we're talking about for NASCAR racing, right? In the NASCAR racing we have like 10 cars. What is the possibility, right? How many different first, second, and third place could you get, right? So understand that the car number 1, car number 2, car number 3 in that order is different than car number 3, car number 1, and car number 2 in that order. So 2 different orders, 2 different possibilities. Now, imagine that you have, you need to create triangles with a bunch of dots all over the piece of paper, right? So you need to see that you need to link 3 dots to get a triangle. But if you link dot A with dot B with dot C, you have one triangle. But if you link dot C with dot A and dot B, you have exactly the same triangle. So in that case, the order doesn't matter, right? So it's important to have, in my opinion, having an example in your mind to be able, in case this question show up in the exam. All right, moving on now, okay, to probability distributions. Okay, now we're going to talk about the t distribution and the normal distribution, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the f distribution as well. But f distribution is waiting for you on the level 2 with more probabilities. All right. So which type of distributions are important here? Well, first of all, we need to know that there are continuous distributions and discrete distributions. Discrete distribution only accept round numbers as the outcomes, okay? Or in the continuous distribution would accept any value as an outcome. Quick example: let's say you have a repair shop, right, for vehicles, and you want to know the probability of 10 vehicles arriving that day. So you need to make sure that you have all the supplies that you needed there for 10 vehicles. What is that probability? Well, that's a discrete scenario. You're going to have 1 car, 2 cars, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 20, but you cannot have 1.5 cars, 1.3 cars, 1.2 cars. So when you're talking about scenarios where only accept round numbers, we have a discrete distribution. Now, if I'm facing a situation that I'm selling, let's say I'm selling a particular fabric, right? That's what my business is. And I'm selling by the square footage, right? Or the square yard, but let's say square footage. Square footage, you can have 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.10, right? So you can have several different ones. So that's a continuous distribution. So what is the probability that one day in a given store, the owner or the store will sell more than 3.3 square footage of that material? Well, it's a continuous distribution. That matters because if you pick a formula for a discrete distribution to apply in a continuous scenario and vice versa, you're not going to get the right conclusion. Okay? I think that's it that you need to know for discrete distribution. Now, the reading shows you how to do the binomial distribution, which is the most common one for a discrete distribution. Combination of n, p, multiplied by the, look at here, probability of success, right, at a power of the number that you need. For example, in that case, the probability of having 10 cars multiplied by 1 minus the probability of having less than 10 cars, multiplied by how many cars I could have in one day, put it all together, blend it in, and that gives you the probability of that happen. That's the binomial distribution. Now, the more important for us financial analysts will be the continuous distribution because it has infinite possibilities. All right, continuing here, I put some kind of like important info here for you that in a normal distribution, okay, we're talking about kurtosis a little bit ago, right? So kurtosis is how many standard deviations I need to cover the entire normal distribution. Well, if I have 3 plus or minus, I cover 99%. But if I have less than 3, let's say I have 2, I cover 95%. If I have 1 standard deviation plus or minus, I cover 68% of that curve. And if I have 2/3 of a standard deviation to the left and to the right, I cover exactly half of that curve. I don't know how this is, could show up in a question, but it could because it's on the reading material. Make sure that you know how to apply the normal distribution or where is applied, right? What is the difference between a normal and a t distribution, which I'm going to explain in a second. And in a very big one in finance, it's a consequence of the normal distribution is the log normal distribution, which is a distribution that only accepts positive values. In real life, there are scenarios where you're not going to have negative values like the price of stocks, for example. So if you want to do an analysis on stock prices, you're going to need a distribution that does not accept negative numbers, because stocks cannot be negative, right? The value, the maximum will be 0, or the minimum, excuse me, will be 0. Therefore, the log normal distribution helps on that regard, okay? All right, I'm not going to show the questions here because, again, it's a review, but go learning module 4 has a lot of interesting questions, right, that you can review. One of the example here is, what is a limitation of the Monte Carlo simulation? There was a question on that reading, right? Let's see here, sample and estimation, right? Let's see if I can do this quick here, okay? So the sample and estimation, I want to talk about the central limit theory, the theorem that's right here, okay? The central limit theorem. It's a very important theorem, and you need to know, right? More to answer conceptual questions, right? So that means that if you take any population, anyone, doesn't matter how that population is distributed, normal, non-normal, skewed, not skewed, it's kurtosis, doesn't matter. If you remove a sample relatively large out of that population, you can assume this sample is normal distributed. It's a theorem called the theorem of central limit, or the limit central limit theorem. Okay, so those are the characteristics. The standard deviation of the sample, right? It's usually called the sample error or the standard error, which is nothing more than the standard deviation of the population divided by the square root of n. That one is important to know, okay? That one is important to know, the formula for the standard error. Okay? All right, moving on, friends. Another thing that's important in QM is confidence intervals. Please make sure that you remember how to do a confidence interval, okay? A confidence interval, it's the mean plus, let's put here, mean plus or minus, that's a mean, plus or minus a reliability factor times a variability factor. Well, what is this? Reliability means confidence. Variability means error. So if you multiply the confidence number pre-assigned by the financial analyst times the standard error of the sample, that gives you a number that you're going to add on the expected value and subtract from the expected value to get a upper bound and a lower bound. That's your interval, okay? So make sure that you understand. Reliability is the critical value. So if you want a 99% confidence, you're going to use a critical value. That's higher than if you want a 90% confidence. So what question could show up here? Like, what happened to the confidence interval if the financial analyst wants 90% rather than 95% confidence? Or if the standard error is, or if the population is larger, right? If you increase the sample, what happened to the confidence interval? That's the type of questions you need to kind of like be ready for, right? So what happened to the confidence interval if instead of 99% confidence, we want 90% confidence? So the interval shrinks, right? Gets smaller, right? What about if I add more numbers in my sample, more elements on my sample? Then also will go down, because we're going to have to divide it by the square root of n. When we divide it by a large n, we get a small error. We have a small variability. We have a smaller interval. Make sure that you really get this. You might have to compute an interval, maybe, it's possible, but you also may have to answer questions related to that without any calculation. All right, let's talk about t-distribution now. Okay, because the t-distribution is one of those that, I don't know, students have, especially if you never seen statistics, or, if that's not your favorite, or it was not something that you studied with, like in school, etc., they might be a little difficult to understand. So let's see. The t-distribution is similar to the normal distribution, except that has more kurtosis. The t-distribution has more kurtosis than the normal. Therefore, the t-distribution has longer tails, right? The tails are longer. It's going to take a while to touch the x-axis. So we have more possibilities of outliers. That's the t-distribution. Now, why we use it? We use the t-distribution So it's in case you don't have much reliable data or large number of data or something like that, we use the t-distribution as a way to increase the possibility of errors. It's possible, right? We don't have the entire population to study. We have just a small portion of it. Well, I'm not going to use the normal distribution in this case because the normal distribution is more accurate. He assumes more accuracy on the data than the t-distribution. I'm going to use the t-distribution to give me a little bit more room for errors, right? That's the idea behind using the t-distribution, okay? Now, you need to know the difference, right? When exactly to use it. So you use the t-distribution, we have a small sample, right? For example, variance unknown. So we have like a list of steps on when to use the t-distribution. What else? Then I put here, the t-distribution, use it when the population variance and standard deviation are not defined. Let's put in English here, not defined. And this sample is small, right? Not defined. Now, don't bother memorizing what a small sample means, okay? They say 30, less than 30 small, but I don't think you're ever going to be tested on that because, you know, it could vary, right? All right. Another thing that could be on the exam is the sampling problems, right? Possible problem with sampling. Sampling means collecting your data to do the analysis. So make sure you know what they mean. Data mining, survivorship bias, look-ahead bias, time period bias. And make sure you know it because it could show up again on level 3, right? Level 3 also is going to ask you to some types of bias involved in financial analysis, right? All right, so that covers 3, 4, and 5, right? Because those has not changed yet. All right, reading 6 and 7, right? Reading 6, it's exactly the same, right? It has not changed at all. It's the hypothesis test. So make sure that you know the steps in hypothesis test. We have 6 steps. The first one is state the hypothesis. What is the hypothesis? It's age 0 and age A. It's the null and the alternate hypothesis. I always tell the folks that are doing this, listen, if you're doing the alternate hypothesis, or excuse me, if you're looking for the null hypothesis, the age 0, put it there what you want to reject. So if I'm doing expected returns, I usually want the expected returns to be higher or at least equal to that number. I don't want them to be lower than. So that's what I want to reject. I want to reject that the returns are lower than some value or they're different than some value. That's what I want to reject, okay? Or I want to reject that equal to 0, right? When you're going to see linear regression. You don't want the parameters of your linear regression to be 0. So you're going to test them to be that they are, to make sure that they are not 0, that you reject the hypothesis that they are 0. So the age 0, the hypothesis that starts with, is the one you want to reject. Second, you identify the test, if it's a T, most likely, or a Z, or an F. An F test, friends, you only use for variance analysis. If you're doing the variance or 2 samples, variance or 2, any populations, etc., then you use the F statistics. And F statistics is going to be big on level 2. On expect values that you expected to be something and you want to test if they are going to be different than what you expected. Look, the keyword here is expected. You use only either the T or the Z distribution. Most likely you're going to use a T distribution. Specify the significance level, 95, 90, 99%. What is the decision rule? The decision rule is if the critical value of my sample, my calculation is bigger, right? What is the critical value? I'll reject. Critical value is the pre-assigned number by the financial analyst before collecting the data, so it can compare with the data to see if the t-stats predetermined it's less than the critical value founded on this with the sample analysis. And if this critical value predetermined is less than, then you reject any hypothesis, right? It's very important. That's what you call making the decision. All right. Here you have a couple examples of null hypothesis, alternate hypothesis, right? So this has nothing changed. Error, make sure you know the types of error, error 1, error 2, right? What is an example of error 1 type, error 2 type, Make sure that you're really comfortable with that. Okay. All right. Linear regression, friends. Linear regression, it's gonna be, in my opinion, a little bit more testable, right, on your exam, because it has not many changes on the level 1, okay, but a lot of changes on the level 2 exam regarding linear regression. So simple regression is no more part of level 2 exam, okay. So I'm suspecting, and that's just an opinion, right? Not just a suspicion. Sorry about that. There you go. It's just a suspicion that you will now be tested more in linear regression to prepare you for the next exam. So don't underestimate linear regression for the CFA Level 1 exam. Okay? Make sure that you know what the regression is. Make sure the assumptions related to the regression, like linear relationship, homoscedasticity, independence of error, and normal distribution of the errors. Those are the assumptions of linear regression. Yeah? Make sure that you know what the R-square is. Right? What is the R-square? Is the coefficient of determination. That explains how well the X variable explains the Y variable. The independent explains the dependent. That's measured by the R-square. So if you take the square root of R-square, you get the correlation between the variables. That's important to remember as well. All right. The reading talks about ANOVA, okay? But ANOVA, right? It's the ANOVA, right? Let me actually put it here a little bit. It's a concept that you're gonna see much more on level 2, okay? The ANOVA table. There we go. So I would just say to you, look, ANOVA means analysis of variance. Variance, we need the F test or the chi or chi-square test, not chi, by the way. Huh? This is chi or chi-square test, okay, to do variance analysis. So I would not worry much. I mean, again, I cannot promise this to you, but I would say I would not worry much about F test or chi-square or chi-square test in my level 1 exam. Okay. Right. And yeah, I guess this is all. Let's finish with this. What is a log-lin log, and a log-log model? Okay, so a linear log model, a log-linear model, and the log-log model. Well, it's just model of linear regression. You can do log of y equals 3 plus log of x. Well, that's the log-log. Okay? A log-linear, it's log of y equal 3 plus 4x. And log-lin, or lin-log, lin-log means y equals 3 plus the log of x. So those are just variation. Here I would predict that you could get a linear regression, and then you're going to have to replace the value of x and find the value of y. Okay? All right, I'm moving on to economics now. Right? I want to spend some time on the learning module 6. Okay? So supply and demand, it's important. Matter of fact, learning module 1 and 2, friends, in economics, it's microeconomics. That's not, and all the other ones are macroeconomics. So, with a very educated guess here, I would say that at least 25% of your exam of economics should be in microeconomics. Consequently, there are big chances that 3, maybe 4 questions of QM come from learning modules 1 and 2, microeconomics, right? So supply, demand, elasticity, costs, and market structures. Please make sure that you are comfortable with those topics. You're gonna get one line question here most likely, right? Which of the following change the demand for a product? Which of the two products have a cross elasticity of -3? Are they normal, inferior, substitutes, complementary? That type of questions, okay? This is all microeconomics. So learning module 1, learning module 2 is microeconomics, okay? Learning module 3 and 4, very important as well. Supply, aggregated demand, inflation, GDP, right? And business cycle. Business cycle, I also predicted questions on your exam, okay? Then learning module 5 is economic policies. Learning module 6, economic policies for the learning module 5 is fiscal policy and monetary policy. Okay, those are classics. Those are classics. What do you call? Concepts, economic policies, and they probably will be at least one question, maybe. Okay, but not more than one. I don't know if they're going to spend so much time doing economic policies on your exam. Geopolitics, well, look, the common sense tells me, look, that's a brand new module. Why not ask at least one question of this new module of geopolitics? So, okay, the good thing here is it's an easy module because it's all reading. The problem is everything could become a question on that module. A line, a paragraph, it could be used to create a question for geopolitics. Okay, I'm gonna go over those in more details after I cover this. Learning modules 7 and 8, they're classic. They've been there for a while. They've been there since I took the exam. International trade, exchange rates, and before I take the exam, they're there as well. So those are not modules that have changed much. Okay, if you had the opportunity to do mock exams, if you did many mock exams, you most likely cover many of the possible questions you're gonna get in economics, except for the new topics. All right. So quickly, supply, demand, elasticity, and cost. Make sure that you understand the difference, right? What moves the quantity demanded, the quantity supplied, versus what moves the entire demand and the entire supply. Important. So quantity demanded, it's when you buy more or less. The only thing that makes you to buy more or less quantity of the same product at the same time is the price of the product. Same for the seller. The seller is going to sell more units or less units of that product, the same product to the same person. If the price is higher, sell more. If the price is lower, sells less. Quantity, it's related to the price. Now, what moves the entire supply? What moves the entire demand? That's another thing. So income level. So the population start making more money. They're going to buy more things in general. That's increase the demand. Labor. Let's say now we don't have minimum wage, or we have more supply of labor. So that makes labor cheaper and more available. So production go up, supply go up. Less regulation, less taxation. All of this change the behavior of the entire supply, not only one product, but everybody. So that's what we call change in the entire curve versus the movement on the curve. Okay, all right. Elasticity, important. Should you expect a calculation of elasticity? I don't think so. No, I think you should get a question. You will get a question that you're going to have to interpret something here related to elasticity. So some kind of interpretation. Okay, so it would be, for example, if they give you the elasticity, the income elasticity between A and B, product A and product B, the income elasticity is -1. Are those products substitutes, complementary? Are those products normal, inferior? What are they? All right? Just based on the definition, okay? Just based, okay? Another one that you need to know is the cross elasticity, okay? Another thing that could be there is if the product is elastic, the product has an elastic demand, and the owner of the business decide to increase the price, what happened to the total revenue? Well, the total revenue is going to go down because you need to understand the concept of elasticity. If I have a high elasticity, means if I increase the price a little bit, I will lose more customers in percentage terms than if I increase the price. Okay, so total revenue goes down when the product is elastic, and you increase the price. And total revenue goes up when the product is inelastic and the producer or the vendor increase the price. Important to remember those. All right, let's talk about cost curves, friend. Cost curves. So you have the cost behavior in business, right? So the cost behavior, okay, that's good, right there. The cost behavior, okay, let's put this on a little bit so you can see the word quantity there, or effect. So look at that. Those cost curves here, right? Look at the shape of those curves, right? They all have this J shape that goes down, okay? So each one of those curves will have a behavior, right, as you see. So why they start high and they goes down, right? So the green one is called the marginal, okay, the marginal curve, the marginal revenue curve, okay? So let's see if they don't have there you go. The marginal curve, let's push this one there we go, perfect. Here, marginal cost, average total cost, average variable cost, okay? MC, ATC, AVC, okay? So just understand the behavior. Look at that. The marginal cost is the one that goes down and then sharply turns around and exponentially increase. Is the highest cost increase you can possibly find in production. The marginal, the additional cost. The cost to produce one more unit, how much is it? Now the average cost, they are average with the previous ones, so they are smoother. The curve is not too exponential as the marginal cost, because you keep adding the cost of previous units which were cheaper than the ones that you're producing now. So that average kind of makes the curve a little bit less intense, right? That's the marginal cost. Very important. Now, another thing that's super important is to understand the concept of marginal revenue and marginal cost. When the additional revenue of selling one more product equals the additional cost of making that product, that's it. Don't produce any more units after that, because the cost is gonna go up exponentially, like you see here, the MC goes exponentially, but the marginal revenue cannot follow the cost. You cannot increase the price every time that your cost increase. You just can't, right? So because of that, you're gonna have to stop producing at one point. That point determines the optimum quantity to produce. That quantity is called, right, that's called the profit maximization quantity. Is the quantity that will maximize the profit for that scenario. All right, I am gonna ask your permission here, and I'm gonna just leave the room so you can see the whole image here. Now is the learning module number 2 of economics. That's market structures. Make sure you know the difference between perfect competitive firm, oligopoly, monopoly, and monopolistic competition. I try to include here as many possible differences that they have among themselves, but you could try to do a list of that yourselves as well, because you could have a question like that. According to the perfect competition scenario, which of the following is true, or most likely correct, most likely incorrect, least likely? So that could all be questions. So make sure, PCF, oligopoly, monopoly, and monopolistic competition, okay? Don't underestimate those market structures, okay? I just want to mention that the profit maximization rule for them, it's always MR equals MC. MR equals MC, MR equals MC, MR equals MC. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost determines the ideal quantity, okay? Another thing I want to mention is that the demand curve for the perfect competition is horizontal. It's like that because the perfect competition has no incentive to put the price up or down. So the price has to be exactly the same for every player in that market. Therefore, it's horizontal, okay? On the other hand, the supply curve of something limited, it's vertical. It's a vertical curve, okay? It's vertical. Like an example is the tickets, supply of tickets for the Super Bowl. This Super Bowl that's coming, its supply is limited because you only have a number of seats, right? That you can put a number of people there. So that will be, the representation will be a vertical curve. All right. Important here to mention is the shutdown decision. Be careful. You have two decisions here. The profit maximization decision, when do you stop producing, or how many units should you produce to maximize profit? That's one decision. Second decision, when you should shut down your business under the perfect competition. So you shut down the business, you go away, goodbye, you're not here, that's not for you, when the variable cost per unit it's higher than the price per unit. Then you have no, it's impossible to survive, okay? It's not gonna be possible. All right, Prisoner's dilemma and Nash equilibrium, it appears on the text when you talk about cartel agreements to explain why cartels do not work. Okay, cartel agreement will not work. And the reason is that one of the members will always have the incentive to break the agreement and do better for itself. In that case, if one thinks that way, everybody might think that way, so the cartel agreement, which will be functioning as a monopoly, will not work. All right. In that reading, number 2, finish with market concentration. Make sure you know at least how to do the calculation of the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, the HHI, and also the X company concentration ratio. Could be 4, could be 5. It's just adding the market share. Right? And on the HHI, you have to square of each market share and add, and then compare the total with a table that will be given on the problem to see if it's concentrated, high concentration, low concentration, or mild concentration of business. Concentration means 1 or 2 business dominate the market. Okay, that's high concentration. Low concentration is the market is shared, split among several different companies. Moving on. Okay. Here I have the learning module 3 of macroeconomics indicators. Right. So macroeconomic indicators, right? GDP, inflation, unemployment. Make sure you know the GDP deflator. It's a way to compute inflation, and also the CPI method to compute inflation, consumer price index. Okay? Understand the methods of calculate GDP. Make sure that you arrive in the exam knowing at least, or hopefully all of them, but at least the expenditure approach, because it's the most used method, the expenditure approach, which is consumption plus investment plus government spending plus exports minus imports. Okay? A question could show up, what could change, what would increase the GDP of a country? Or they give you a scenario and you have to see if the GDP is going to increase or decrease or no change after that. So that type of thing. Okay? I put here the formula of the national income approach to compute the GDP, but I don't know how much this is going to be important there. It's a complicated formula. It's not the preferable method anyway, but we never know. Okay, so take a look on that. Right here is a consequence of the GDP formula, the expenditure approach, the S minus I, okay, which is the excess of savings over investments. It's equal to government spending minus tax revenue. The name of this is government deficit. Plus the X minus M, which is export minus M, minus import, that's the trade balance. So what we're seeing here is that savings, excess of savings, helps to finance government deficit and trade balance or trade imbalances. That's what's written there. Friends, I'm finishing this learning module 3 here, the 3, with this equation here called the Solow growth equation on potential GDP. Okay, it's an equation for the 1960s, I think, end of 50s. And just try to digest this equation here. This is going to be more required on level 2. So if you do a good job here understanding how this works now, I think it will help you on the next exam. Delta y divided by y is only the change on the output. So look what's written here. Change on the output equals change in A over A. A is technology. Technology here is represented by total factor productivity. There. A, total factor productivity. But you don't need to remember the name. Remember technology. So the change in technology with respect to technology. Plus, forget the alpha for now. The change in capital divided by capital. So plus the change in L with respect to L. So in other words, technology plus capital plus labor equals the output. That's what's written there. Okay? So any change on technology, any change on the labor, any change on capital investment will change the output proportionally. That's it. Alpha K and alpha L is the percentage of allocation to capital and labor, and it's always 100%. So it's going to be 30% on capital, 70% on labor, or vice versa, etc. That's it. That's the Solow's growth equation, right? The output growth, or growth in potential GDP or output. Total factor productivity growth or change plus the growth in labor plus the growth in capital. All right, now I'm going to a reading which I think it's very much testable, very much likely to be a question or two on that exam, is the business cycle. Remember, you have business cycle, you have life industry cycle, and you have company cycle in here on as part of the content for your exam. So don't confuse those cycles. Okay, business cycle is in economics, right? The other ones are in equity. So expansion, peak, recession, trough are the points of the business cycle. But I think the question here will be more like on the indicators, on the economic indicators of your business cycle. Means when you arrive into a peak, what does it tell you that we're getting there? When you arrive in a recession, what's telling you there? When you are inside the recession, what are the indicators that tell you that? When you're getting out of recession, what are the indicators telling you that? So that's why I strongly suggest you to memorize this list of indicators here. Really memorize them. Okay, I think that's going to be helpful for you. Okay, then let me actually put it back there. There you go. And I'm coming back just to kind of explain a little bit. So those indicators, lagging, coincidental, and leading, right? Take a look. Try to memorize few of them, because you never know. Like if this is happening, which point of the where is this? Right? You arriving to a peak, you leaving a recession. That's the type of question I predict could be on the indicators. All right, moving on here, friends. We are now going to talk about unemployment. Okay, unemployment rate, employment rate, and so on and so forth. So here I have, okay, just quick here for you. You start with the entire population, right? And then you remove the folks that are not supposed to work, which are underage people, people in national security, right? That they have to be ready to defend the country, so they're technically not part of the labor force, and people in institutions like prisons and hospitals. Remove those, what's left is called the civilian non-institutional population. Out of those folks, remove those that don't want to work or do not need to work. It's not everybody that needs to work, right? So remove that. Could be discouraged workers or people that already have enough income from other means that they don't need to work. Remove them. What is left is the labor force. Okay, that's your labor force here. That's the labor force of a country. Out of the labor force, you're going to remove people that are employed and unemployed. So you're going to divide it in employed and unemployed. Good. Once you arrive on those figures, numbers, right, then you can compute the rates, unemployment rate, right, or you can compute here, in this case, the unemployment rate, unemployed people divided by the labor force. Be careful with the employment rate. Employment rate is employed people divided by the civilian non-institutional population, okay? Not the labor force. So you cannot add unemployment rate with employment rate. You just can't, okay? They have two different denominators. And the third one is called the labor force participation rate, which is the labor force divided by your civilian non-institutional population. All right, let's review more here. Recessionary gap, what it is the real GDP, right, or actual GDP. It's lower than the maximum GDP that the country can achieve, producing a full employment. Inflationary gap is the opposite, but inflationary gap, don't worry much about it, because this is very unrealistic scenario. Is when a country produce more than the maximum output they could. It doesn't make any sense, kind of, but there is a theoretical scenario where this could happen, right? So I think you should worry more about the recessionary gap and how to fix it. How to fix it? Recessionary gap is going to be with economic policies, which is the learning module 5. Okay, so we're going to review learning module 5 now. All right. Just mentioned to you, the natural unemployment is a sum of frictional and structural unemployment. Frictional is people lose their jobs for different reasons because the economy is up and down. That's normal. Structural unemployment is when the unemployment disappears, when the job disappears. You don't need more that job, right? That job is gone. My example, I was a stock trader in the beginning of year 2000, right? Where several stock traders in that place. Now the machines are taking over, so that job of the stock trader in the trading room, etc., it's pretty much becoming a structure unemployment job, right? That's not, the machines are taking over. This is normal, so because both are normal, you have your natural normal unemployment. So full employment, my friends, full employment, it's when the unemployment rate it's equal to the natural unemployment. Okay? If it's equal to the natural, then we're in full potential, full employment. All right. Let's talk about economic policies. Let's do here divided in federal government and central bank. Okay? Federal government will do fiscal policy. Central bank will do monetary policy. Make sure you understand what is fiscal policy and what is monetary policy. Fiscal policy is the government spending more or less money, increasing or decreasing taxes to do something so the economy can move forward or the economy can reduce inflationary scenario. Okay, so if you want to do an expansionary fiscal policy, you're going to expand the economy. The economy is in a recession, you need to expand. How? The government will spend more money or the government will lower taxes. If the government wants to contract the economy because the economy is in high inflation, it will do a contractionary policy. We will stop spending and we will increase taxes, right? So that would have the effect. Now, I just want to mention that this could be done to the demand side or to the supply side, meaning you can do a tax break for citizens or you can do a tax break for business. You can do a spending more money to help the buyers to buy more, or the government can spend more money to help the producers to produce more, right? That's a choice. All right, so just make sure you know the difference between expansionary and contractionary policies. Just make sure, because the reading talks about the School of Economics, they're talking about the Keynesians and the monetarists. Just make sure that you understand the Keynesians are the ones that advocate for government spending. Monetarists advocate for little government intervention in the economy. Monetary policy, friends, central bank. What the central bank will do? The central bank will do three things, and you need to know the three tools, the three mechanisms that the central bank has to control the money supply. One is to buy securities from banks. So go to the bank, buy securities from the banks, give money to the banks. Banks have more money. Banks have more money. They make more loans. They make more loans. The money goes in the economy. So there's more money in the economy. So expanded the amount of money in circulation. Sell securities is the opposite. The Federal Reserve goes to the bank and sells securities to the banks. The banks bought the securities, pays the Federal Reserve or the central bank with money, and that the banks will have less money to make loans, less money in circulation. So the first one was an expansionary monetary policy by buying securities from banks. And the second one, selling securities to the banks, is contractionary monetary policy. You need to know the difference between expansionary and contractionary monetary and fiscal policies. Let's see the second tool, the second mechanism for the central bank. Require reserve for banks. So the central bank can tell banks, listen, you cannot make any loans. 100% of the deposits must stay in the bank. That's increasing the requirement. They require reserve. And that way, the banks cannot make loans. If you don't make any loans, the money doesn't go in circulation. And if it doesn't go in circulation, we're going to have less money available. Less money available contracts the economy. That's a contractionary policy. But if the federal or the central bank decreases the requirement, then there's more money in the economy. And more money in the economy stimulates the economy. So this will be applicable for a recession. You need to know when the central bank, I keep saying Federal Reserve because that's the central bank of the United States, but this will be any central bank applying those policies, when those policies would be applied. Last one is the discount rate or interest rate. The Federal Reserve or the central bank has the discretion to change one interest rate called the discount rate, the lowest interest rate in the economy. Is the interest rate that the central bank charges another bank if the bank needs a loan. That's very low. But that's the benchmark for all interest rates in the economy. Therefore, if the central bank increase that reference rate, all the rates increase, gets more expensive to borrow, people don't use the credit card, they don't consume, the economy contracts. But if the Federal Reserve decreases the interest rates, all the other interest rates goes down, more loans will be made, more purchases will be made, and the economy will move forward. That's ideal to get out of a recession. All right. Lags on fiscal policy, make sure you know at least what they mean. Means that fiscal policy usually doesn't work as good as monetary, because fiscal policy has more time delay to be implemented. Because let's say the government wants to wait a little bit more to make sure that there is a problem. That's called the wait and see lag. Once the government decided that there is a problem and takes action, it has to present to the Congress, right, to be approved for the measures. That takes time. That's called legislative lag. Then you have the implementation lag, right? That takes a long time too. So again, fiscal policy could have those problems. This could be a question. Crowding out is when the fiscal policy does not work. Fiscal policy gets blocked in the middle of the way, and it doesn't have the effect. So the government pumps a lot of money in the economy, but the economy does not move forward. So that's problematic. So that's called crowding out. All right, moving on. Now I'm arriving on the reading 6, which is a new reading. Okay, this reading here, it's new. Again, so technically no questions have been asked about this reading on past exams. This is fresh, that's new. So it's going to be hard to predict how those questions are going to be. My take is it's going to be on risks, right? Related to risks and definitions. So here I put it for you. For example, what is the when you have a combination of globalization and cooperation, what is the name of that? That's called multilateralism. Okay? When you have a combination of globalization and non-cooperation, you have a hegemonic or hegemony, if you pronounce the H, state. Autarky is when you have a non-cooperation with a nationalism. In bilateralism, it's a combination of nationalism and cooperation. So I predict that some questions could appear from here. Okay? Give you a definition and ask if this is an example: multilateralism, bilateralism, or autarky. So make sure you review that. Okay? Degrees of cooperation. What are the examples of non-cooperation and cooperation, right? And right in between. So make sure that could be a question here as well. Okay? Inconsistent rules, arbitrary rules, restricted movements, retaliations, all of those are examples of non-cooperation. That's pretty common sense, I would say. Rules of standardization. What is it? I'll give an example here. If countries cooperate with each other, every single country will have the same outlet for you to put your electric plugs. So I don't need to carry, adapters. So if I go to Europe or go to Latin America or go to other places, right, they have different plugs on the wall for you to turn on your devices, right? That's an example or rule of standardization, right? Labels, things that common to all countries, that makes things much easier. That's an example of cooperation. All right, what else could be there? There could be questions. See, it's a short module, okay? So again, it's easy to read. I would say do all the questions at the end of the chapter and do also the ecosystem questions, and I think you should be fine. All right, friends, geopolitical risks. Make sure that you know what is an event risk, an exogenous risk, and a thematic risk. I put an example of each here for you. Event risk would be change in the government from a more socialist and a less capitalist or vice versa. That's a risk, right? Put yourself in the shoes of a financial analyst investing in global stocks or global portfolios. That's important for us to know, right? That's why you need to know for the exam. Exogenous risk will be like a coup d'etat, like when the government is overthrown and someone takes over. And a thematic risk will be more like a war between those countries. Okay, so go over the definition so you could get an example. Like they give a description and say this is an example of what, and you have to know. Okay? We're talking about geopolitical risks. Now I'm going to talk about geopolitical tools. National security tools, economic tools, and financial tools. So here is like for lack of cooperation of the other country. So you do a national security, right? So you put your national security under advice here. You could implement economic pressures, or you could apply financial pressures. So economic pressure is not stop trading of the other country. Financial pressure is restrict the capital movements from that country to other countries, right? Or to your country. So that's the financial geopolitical tools. Okay? I think it's going to be more on the cooperation, lack of cooperation, and the characteristics or the names, right? The names that you need to remember here, right? And the examples of each one. All right, friends, like finishing here with this global index here. So maybe you have to read it, the global index. Right? There we go, missing. No, it's right here. So let's see. What is this global index? Okay. So look, you need to know how to read the index. It's global risk index in reality, right? This is the risk, the potential risk. And if you are a financial analyst investing in global stocks, you should be aware of how to interpret this. So if it's negative, is good. See, it's the green line is all negative. That's no risk. The score negative is okay. A positive score represents some kind of tension or risk. And you need to know how this is going to impact your portfolio, right? How are you going to impact your clients, and etc. Okay, so Eurozone crisis of 2012, that spiked the risk. Okay, we don't have the Ukraine war here on this graph here, right? But in the Ukraine war, it was also a huge spike on the globe. So the more positive the global index, the more risk. The less positive, the less risk. All right, let's move on. That's it. I mean, I wish I could spend more time on this, but there's not much on the economics, right? I'm going to spend more time on corporate issuers and derivatives than on here. But my advice is that's possible question. It's a possible question in the exam because it's a new reading, right? It's a new module. All right, let's move on. Okay. Learning modules 7 and 8 have not changed at all. So here I'm going to go quick with you. Make sure that you understand the concepts of trade, the concept of comparative advantage, absolute advantage, restrictions, arguments in favor, arguments against restrictions, right? Argument in favor, the national defense argument. So if the products that are related to national defense should not be produced by other countries, so we should not import from them. Okay? Cons, negative, against the so restriction disrupt it causes problems in the domestic economy, cause the price to go up, right? Makes difficult the access to other products. So again, pros and cons. The learning module talks about comparative advantage under the Ricardian model and under the Heckscher-Ohlin model. Make sure you understand those two. Ricardian says that every country should trade what they can do best, even though they can do best everything, called the absolute advantage. And Heckscher-Ohlin model said all countries should export what they can make with abundant factors, meaning the more factors of production they have available, that's what they should focus on, either labor or capital intensive. So countries that have a lot of labor intensive should focus on labor products that are labor intensive to export. And the other way around, if the country has a low population, low labor force, but is very high in technology and capital investment, then that's what they should do. The balance of payments, it's important, you need to know. For the CFA exam, I would say just remember the current and the capital account. What goes inside the current, what goes inside the capital account. Make sure that you understand why they're always in balance, right? And what makes this whole thing to be in balance are statistic discrepancy, which it's not very relevant, but what makes this to be always in balance is the exchange rate adjustment. So if you have a deficit on the current account, you will have a surplus on the capital account due to the currency, right? The devaluation, to make sure that the balance of payments will be in balance. The balance of payment will always be equal to zero, meaning the amount that goes in equals the amount that goes out, right? According to this. All right. Last topic of economics is international finance. This is big on level 2, therefore I assume it's not going to be too big on level 1. So what you need to know here, it's my opinion, is the exchange rates, the types of exchange rates, flexible, fixed exchange rates, right? Maybe some calculation, but if you go to the learning outcomes of this module, there's not many calculates there, right? There's more is explain, define, right? Explain the fixed exchange rate, explain the flexible exchange rate, right? Etc. Let's see. Well, this is important to mention that the appreciation of a currency means if one currency appreciates, the other depreciates, but not exactly the same proportion. Okay, so here is if a currency depreciates by 10%, then the other currency will appreciate by 11%. How do we do that? The formula is appreciation of a currency. It's equal to one divided by 1 minus the depreciation of the other currency. So the inverse of 1 minus the depreciation of the currency equals the appreciation for the other currency. All right. The interest rate parity will be big on level 2, so I do not expect anything here on level 1. But again, it's if you want to do yourself a favor and make your life a little easier for level 2, go over the interest rate parity, how to compute forward rates, right? From today the spot to the forward rate, how this is done. Okay. Cross rates as well. I predict cross rates to be big on level 2. Therefore, I do not predict some kind of cross rate question on level 1. But again, it's on the reading, so you should know how to do it. Cross rates is finding the currency, the value of one currency over another, pathing by a third currency. So you need one common currency to find the code that you're looking for. All right. And here I'm going to finish this review for this learning module talking about the exchange rate models or regimes. Okay, we have currency board system, parity system, target zone, fixed crawling, managed float, free float. The last two are flexible exchange rates. The other ones are fixed. Make sure you know the pros and the cons of flexible and fixed rates. I'll give you one of each. One positive of the fixed rate is that you can predict purchase and payments in the future because you know exactly how the level of the currency is. So for business, it's actually good on that aspect. Now, a fixed currency, the problem is it costs a lot of money for the domestic country to keep up with that fixed currency, especially if that country has inflation and some macroeconomic problems. That can cost quite a lot to keep the currency fixed. So that's a negative aspect. For the flexible, what is good about the flexible is that it reflects supply and demand. So it's really like how the market should work in a flexible exchange rate. But the negative is that the flexible exchange rate can just tank, and that can go down and become so impractical, and even the local government, it might be too late to take over or to fix it or do something. All right, friends, that would be my contribution here for the economics. Remember, there's one new module here, module 6, geopolitics, that you should do the best you can here too, because you're gonna get probably one question. Would you get two questions? I don't think so. I think you're gonna get one question of geopolitics on your exam. All right, friends, so let's go now to FSA. FSA, I'm going to start saying right at the batch that 2 readings from last year, 2022, are no longer on 2023, are the reading on the characteristics of financial reports, right? Used to be reading 15 and 16 on the 2022 material. Those are no longer there, okay? So that's when you're talking about constraints of financial statements, enhancing qualitative analysis, framework, etc., right? That's readings specific, they were removed. Now, what they did is focus on the other readings that were there. That's balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, inventory, and fixed assets for the asset part. Then they did liabilities, long-term liabilities, right? And then quality of financial statements. That's it. That's your FSA right there. So what I believe that's going to be, there would be in FSA, because there's no much change here, so I'm not going to do a comprehensive review here because I have a comprehensive review of this topic on the previous video that I did for the November 2022 exam. Okay, so here very quickly, start the first module for the 2023 FSA is income statements. So make sure that you understand all the components of your income statements, right? Make sure that you know all the types of profit, as I'm showing here, the gross profit, the EBITDA, the EBIT, the EBIT, net income, all of those, okay? Why is important? Because you might face questions regarding ratios. So what is the impact on the gross profit ratio? What is the impact on ratios that has net income? So see if you have the components of your income statement lined up, should be relatively easier for you to figure it out, or at least easier to figure out the answer. Let's see. One big point of the income statement module is the earnings per share. So make sure that you know 2 things here about earnings per share. That you know how to calculate the weighted average number of shares, and that you know how to calculate diluted earnings per share, or DEPS, or DEPS. Okay? Weighted average number of shares. Okay? Make sure that you know how to do for stock dividends and stock splits. Because stock dividend and stock splits alter everything that was before the split or the dividends. And then don't forget about the concept of proportionality. So if the shares were issued in July and they didn't stay the full year, then they'll count as half of the weight of the shares that being issued before January that year. Okay? So you should review those. There's an example here. Right? January 1st, they had 10,000 shares. Then there was a stock dividend of 10%. So those 10,000 shares, right, now become 11,000 shares. Right? Then 2,000 new shares were issued in July. Then there was a 3-per-1 stock split, altering the 11,000 shares there. Now becomes 33,000 right there. And those 2,000 here become 6,000 shares. Right? And then 1,200 shares were issued at November, okay? So this would be the weighted average. You have to do proportional by the time that those shares were issued. I'm reminding you that stock dividend and split will alter that number. All right, DPS, the diluted earnings per share. There's 3 scenarios that you need to make sure that you're comfortable with. The convertible preferred stock. If all preferred stocks were converted into common stocks, what would be the impact on the earnings per share? If all the stock options were converted by the managers that have options, what would happen to the earnings per share? And if all convertible bonds were converted into common shares, what would happen? Okay? There we go. So DEPS, so diluted earnings per share. Okay. It could be that this is not dilutive, means once you do the calculation, the earnings per share without this possibility of conversion instruments does not go down. That's possible, right? That's called anti-dilutive earnings instruments. But most of the time they will dilute the earnings per share. It's important for the common stockholder to know that information. The common stockholder needs to know if all the instruments that could become common shares were exercised, what would happen to the earnings per share of those investors. All right, let's continue here. Now we're moving to balance sheet, the second learning module of the FSA. Also no changes here whatsoever. So my point for you here is ratios. Make sure, well, first of all, make sure you know the structure of your balance sheet right there, right? That's the GAAP presentation. GAAP presentation starts with current assets and goes to PP&E and intangibles, right? Current liabilities, long-term liabilities, owner's equity, reminding you a component of the owner's equity called the other comprehensive income, or OCI, okay? It's gonna be, you're gonna need to remember that one for the level 2. All right, now the ratios. I cannot stress here, my friends, how much, right? I want you to memorize as many ratios as possible, okay? I cannot tell you that every single ratio is going to be in the exam, because probably will not, but few of those will, most likely. So liquidity ratio, asset management ratio or efficiency ratios, solvency ratio, and profitability ratio. Make sure that you know that. Make some kind of technique to memorize. If you watch my video from November 22 exam, I explained there a couple techniques of memorization of those formulas, but you have to know that, because it's going to be questions like, if we change the inventory method, what would be the impact on the total asset turnover? What would be the impact on the current ratio? What would be the impact on the return on the assets? That type of question. So make sure that those ratios are good. You're good on that. One comment is on the asset or efficiency ratios. Make sure they know how to do the turnover and the days in, and the difference between operating cycle and cash cycle. Very important to know that. Operating cycle is days in accounts receivable and days in inventory. You want it the lowest possible. 1 day accounts receivable turnover, days in accounts receivable of 1 day, inventory days of 1 day, so your total operating cycle will be 2 days. That's great. In 2 days, you're getting paid for all the accounts receivable and you're turning an entire inventory. Okay? Imagine that you're selling helicopters. Every day you sell one. Every day you sell one. We produce one, you sell one. Produce one, you sell one. Right? That's good. That's an idea. Imagine a supermarket. That's very difficult. Imagine a supermarket, right, that gets all cash payments, right? Receive all cash payments, so there's no days to wait, and they sell that entire inventory in 1 day, right? So that's good. That's the operating cycle. So very short operating cycle. Now, the cash cycle takes the operating cycle and subtracts the days in payables. So the cash cycle ideally should be negative. A cash cycle should be negative. So wait 1 day to get paid, 1 day to turn that inventory, and 60 days to pay. So your cash cycle will be negative 58. 1 plus 1 minus 60. Negative 58. That's good. Why? Because you receive the money in a day and you wait 60 days to pay. So you can pay your payables with your customers' money, and you can invest the customer money until the date of the payment. So the longer you can legally negotiate, not legally, I mean both parties agree with that time of payment, well, then you're going to get a cash cycle that's negative. Okay? All right. Common size statements. Make sure that you understand why we use the common size, right? We transform all the numbers, the values into decimal, in percentage of total assets, if it's the balance sheet, or in percentage of sales, if it's the income statement, so we can compare companies. Common size statements. Very important to go over that. All right, friends. Third learning module here is cash flow. Make sure you understand the direct method, indirect method. I do not expect you have to do heavy calculations here. Going to be something simple, because calculations of cash flow can take more than 90 seconds if there's too many items. So I don't expect it something like that. They're expecting more like, if the company changed depreciation method, what happened to the cash flow from operations? That's more likely the question you face, more than computing the cash flow. But we never know. So I'm going to go quick with you, reminding how to do the indirect method. The indirect method of cash flow is only used for the cash flow from operations. Right? The cash flow from investing, cash flow from financing, use the direct method. Direct method is you have all the receipts of in and out of money, and then add, subtract that total. Well, that's your total cash flow from financing, total cash flow from investing. Could I do that for the cash flow from operations? Of course. But if we're talking about a multinational here that does operations like, several different places in and out, it's difficult to control the receipts, the payments of expenses. It's difficult. So we use the indirect method. That's much easier, right, to accomplish that. Reminder that both methods, direct and indirect, should give you the same total for the cash flow, okay? And only the cash flow from operations use the indirect method. All right, what is the indirect method? Right here. Is the operating cash flow is done the following way. Start with the net income, add the non-cash charge. The examples are depreciation and amortization. Subtract gains. Gains do not belong on the cash flow from operations. If they are inside the net income, you have to remove it. Losses do not belong on the cash flow from operations. Losses were subtracted from the net income, so you add that back to offset that impact. And then you have to see what happens to your current assets and current liabilities. This is called net working capital. I'm going to put here for you, NWC. So the NWC, the net working capital, right? Increase or decrease could cause this difference on the cash flow from operations. So let's see. When I say current assets, think about accounts receivable. And if you understand what happens to the accounts receivable, it's gonna be the same for all current assets. And when I say current liability, think about accounts payable. And whatever happens to accounts payable is exactly the same logic for any other short-term payable, current payable. So let's see. Increase in accounts receivable. It's bad. It means nobody's paying you. So an increase in accounts receivable is negative cash. You didn't get the money. Okay? Just simple as that. Decrease in accounts receivable. Oh, that's good. Decrease in accounts receivable means people are paying. No? They're paying what they're supposed to. So decrease in accounts receivable is more money. Increase in accounts receivable less money. Well, if this makes sense to you on the accounts receivable, make sure that this makes sense to you on inventory, which is another current asset, right? And prepaid accounts, which is another current asset. Cash is not involved here because cash is cash. We're trying to figure out how much more or less cash we had from the other assets. Now, think about now accounts payable. If I have a decrease in accounts payable, that means less money. The company is paying the payable, so the accounts payable are going down. Less money when the accounts payable go down. And more money when the accounts payable go up, means the company is not paying. So the company is not paying, the accounts payable are increasing. Okay? So this would make more cash available for the company. There you go. And if you understand for the accounts payable, then it's the same logic for wage payable and tax payable, which are the most common liabilities, short-term liabilities. All right. And that's your cash flow from operations. Okay? All right. Here I put for you look, right here, just kind of, depreciation expense is a non-cash expense. So you didn't pay for that, so you put it back. Losses do not belong on the cash flow from operations. Since you're going to use the net income, you have to put the losses back there. Gains do not belong on the cash flow from operations because gain and losses are investments. Gains are added on the net income, then they get subtracted from the net income to compute the cash flow from operations. That's it, friends. Operating cash flow, how this could show up in your exam. Could show up in a question as, how much cash was paid to the suppliers? Or how much cash was received from customer based on some paperwork or some information given on the problem. So I advise you to review those few problems. Just do one of each. One for cash paid to suppliers, and one to compute the cash received from customers, and that would give an idea how this problem could show up in your exam. Well, right here, right below, I'm gonna take myself out of the equation for a second. Be right back. There you go. And here, just to show to you how these are communicating. So see, the first is the net income. You compute the income statement is the first document. You compute the net income. take the net income and add to the retained earnings. That's linking the net income to the, linking the income statement to the balance sheet. They're linked. Now, compute the total cash on the cash flow, and that cash goes to the balance sheet. That's linking the cash flow statement to the balance sheet. Now the three documents are tight. Right? That's how you see these movements on those three documents. They're very important together. This is part of the financial statement framework. All right, moving on. This slide here, I'm gonna go quick here. I'm not gonna even come back yet because I want you to see the whole thing. Okay, is the ratios. Okay, so when this video is posted, because I'm posting the video, there you go. I think I'm gonna do it like that. There you go. When I post this video, then you can go ahead and maybe take a picture. This is a screenshot. If you do one now, it's up to you. So you have all the ratios in one screenshot. Maybe you can memorize or can do some work on that. That's the same slide I had showed you before. I think now it's more likely here. There we go, and perfect. So this one, okay, it's for you to understand that this is super important. I think I put all the ratios. It's missing few ratios here from fixed income, etc. But this is all the counting ratios that you need to know right there. It's very important to arrive on that exam knowing all of that. And don't underestimate level 2. It's not because you're tested on this on level 1 that you're not going to see again on level 2. It's expected that you do not forget those ratios. All right, moving on now to learning module 5 for inventory. The inventory, okay, is important here to know, is the concept of the methods of inventory, the LIFO and the FIFO. So here pretty much you're going to know how to use the LIFO reserve. What is the LIFO reserve? The LIFO reserve is a mandatory information that has to be disclosed if the company uses LIFO as the inventory method. The LIFO reserve is an amount that should be added into the LIFO ending inventory to give you the FIFO ending inventory. So if you want to go from LIFO to FIFO inventory, you add the LIFO reserve into the LIFO inventory. Reminding you, the LIFO inventory is always less, or most likely less, than the FIFO inventory. FIFO inventory is bigger, so if you take LIFO plus something, you get the FIFO inventory. That something is called the LIFO reserve. Now, if you want to get the cost of goods sold from FIFO using LIFO cost of goods sold, you have to subtract the change in the LIFO reserve. Not the LIFO reserve, the change in the LIFO reserve. Okay? That one is also well explained on my other video. That's why I'm just going to mention here to you. This could show up on ratio questions. What is the impact on a ratio if you change the inventory method? For example, what is the impact on your quick ratio if you switch from LIFO to FIFO? Quick ratio, LIFO to FIFO. Okay? Answer, no impact, because the quick ratio excludes the inventory. Tricky question, maybe, but you need to be aware that those questions could be there because it's not too tricky. It's actually accessing your understanding of inventory. And the ratio, quick ratio, you remove the inventory when you computed the quick ratio. Who has more asset turnover? LIFO or FIFO, right? What is which one is going to have more profit at the end of the year? LIFO or FIFO? Which company is going to pay more taxes at the end of the year? LIFO, the one that use LIFO, the one that use FIFO. Okay, so be careful. Okay, so LIFO reserve and change in the LIFO reserve to compute and the inventory at FIFO and cost of goods sold at FIFO. Okay, make sure you understand the implication on ratios. And I want to talk about LIFO liquidation. The LIFO liquidation is when LIFO layers, old LIFO layers, start being liquidated. That's going to change the profit. The company is going to become more profitable because old layers of cheap inventory are being released in the cost of goods sold. So if you don't know what a LIFO liquidation is, go read the definition and understand the impact of LIFO liquidation will have on the profit or profitability ratios of the company. Now moving to, by the way, I suspect that those four, the learning module 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, okay? Well, 6 as well, right? The first 6, definitely very important, right? You definitely need to be aware that most of the questions could be on those modules, okay? All right, here will be fixed assets. So again, no change on the content from 2022 to 2023 on this. So this is gonna be, same thing. When you should capitalize, when you should expense, what is capitalizing, what is expensing? Capitalizing is adding the cost into the asset. Expensing is throwing the cost into the income statement. Expenses reduce profit, right? Capitalization increase assets. Okay, what is the impact on the ratios? Always try to see if each one, what impact on the ratios that will be, right? Intangible assets, purchased or developed, there's a difference, okay? Intangible assets purchased with finite life, you amortize. Purchased intangible assets with infinite lives, you do not amortize. Developed intangible assets and homemade, the intangible assets are not, it's not an asset, okay? It's an expense, okay? So remember that. Net interest, what is the difference between net interest and co-interest? So net interest is if you borrow a certain amount, let's say for do a construction, I borrow $1 million, but I did not use the $1 million right away. So that $1 million was, a little bit was used, and the portion that was not used earned interest. So under IFRS, you have to take the interest that you earned minus the interest that you paid, and that's your net interest. And the interest that you paid, if it's bigger, you capitalize that on your asset. GAAP does not give that option. You have to take all the interest paid and capitalized into your assets. Okay? Make sure you know what goodwill is. When goodwill arrives, goodwill is the excess payment for a purchase of a fixed asset or intangible asset. Usually goodwill, is more for an intangible asset. Let's say you purchase a company. The book value of that company is 1 million and you end up paying 1,300,000. Why did you pay 300,000 more? Because that company has something that's hard to quantify accounting in the account. For example, imagine Coca-Cola. How much is the value of the brand name of Coca-Cola? Hard to quantify. So we're gonna make an offer to buy that company, and that offer will include an extra value to pay for that brand name, brand recognition, etc. That's called goodwill, okay? All right. Anything that you could separate it from this purchase value, that's you could observe the market value, then it's not part of the goodwill. Only the value of assets, right, that you cannot measure, only those values of those assets are the ones included on the goodwill. Okay? All right, methods of depreciation, please make sure you remember. I doubt you're gonna have to do any calculation here. The same way, friends, I doubt that you're gonna have to do any inventory calculation using FIFO, LIFO, anything. It takes too long, okay? It takes too long, okay, to do that. And because it takes too long, I think that's not gonna be a question. The question is gonna be more like when you have to analyze, the question have to be more when you have to interpret the ratios, right? So you can get that, the understanding that you need to demonstrate sorry about that, that you have to demonstrate for the question. So for example, I use it an accelerated method of depreciation, okay? That accelerated method of depreciation is gonna cause some impact on the first year. What is the impact? If I switch, what is the impact? So that's the type of thing, okay? All right, straight line, double declining balance, and the units of production method are the preferable methods that in accounting, so probably that's the ones you're gonna be tested on. Then double declining balance is also called an accelerated method, so that could be that. All right, accelerated methods of depreciation, impact on ratios, all important. What else we have here? I put this formula there just in case. So the average total life of fixed assets equals the average age plus the average useful life, and the formulas for the average age and the average useful life are right here in front of you. Another point there, it's the revaluation model of the IFRS, okay? Revaluation models only allowed on the IFRS. And the revaluation model of fixed assets, right? They will cause an impact because you can revaluate it for higher amount. So for example, you have a fixed asset, right? And you do a revaluation, and that's gonna go up in value. That revaluation may go to the income statement. If it's an impairment, then now you bring it back to the value that it was before, or goes to the other comprehensive income because this is a revaluation surplus. If this is not, if you're not understanding revaluation surplus or the revaluation model, then you need to read it because it could be a quick question here, but if you have no clue what they are, what it means, then you probably would miss it, something that could be relatively easy if you understood the process behind. Okay, right. Another thing here, it's a long reading, the fixed asset. The concept of impairment. Make sure you understand how GAAP computes impairment, how FSA computes impairment. Impairment is on the fixed asset or the intangible asset lost value, and you have to make sure that the accounting value equals, right, some kind of marketable, realizable value. That's called impairment, and is done differently between IFRS and GAAP. Here I put obsolete fixed assets continue to be depreciated until discarded. Long-lived assets available for sale do not depreciate. Okay, that's important, right? All right, let's see here. I put this, I think I want to share this with you at least, so might be helpful for some of you. So let's see here. I'm going to make it a little smaller. And I kind of put here something that you might want to do yourselves. Look at that. Event, the type of ratio, and the impact. And I put inventory and long-lived assets together. So the event could be changing the method, or writing down, or the inventory, which is lower the value of inventory, or a reversal of written down, which is not allowed a GAAP only in IFRS. What would be the impact of those three things on those ratios? So operating cycle, turnover ratios, ratio is profit, ratio is equity, ratio is assets, current ratio, quick ratio, cash ratio. What would be the impact? Higher, no change, or lower? Okay. Do the same for the long-lived assets. If it's a capitalization, which of those ratios will be higher, no change, or lower? If it's a revaluation, which ratio is going to be higher, lower? Right? If it's a depreciation method that you're changing, if it's an impairment, all of those would have impacts or no impact in those ratios. Those are the most important ratios here. That's why they are there. Okay. All right, moving on. This one, next one after long-lived assets, the learning module 7 is taxes. Taxes, I will focus only on deferred taxes. Okay. Deferred taxes, you just need to remember when it happens and when is a deferred tax liability, when is the deferred tax asset, and you need to know the value of deferred tax asset, why it could be used, and when that deferred tax asset has no value anymore, what do you do? Right? That's called the valuation allowance. That's a requirement by GAAP. So look at that. Deferred taxes are temporary difference, so between the fiscal accounting and the normal accounting. So imagine that the fiscal, the IRS or any kind of fiscal authority of the country determines some rules that the companies must follow to compute taxes. And the accounting rules are different than some of those rules. Well, when you have those difference between the accounting rules and the fiscal rules, you're going to have different profit and consequently different tax rates, and not different tax rate, but different tax expense, right? And if you have different tax expense, you're going to have a different deferred tax asset and a deferred tax liability as a consequence. So make sure that you understand this, what I'm going to show here to you. If the tax payable to the government, right, the tax that you own to the government, it's higher, let's say it's 3x, it's higher, right, higher than the tax expense. Okay, so let's see here, the tax expense is going to have 2x's. Okay, then you're going to have a deferred tax asset to compensate for that. So look at that. I have I own 3 to the government. My tax expense I computed as 2, so there's a difference that I have to put on my deferred tax asset. Okay, so a deferred tax asset arrive when your accounting tax expense is lower than your tax payable to the government. And the opposite is true as well. If your tax payable here it's lower than your tax expense, then you're gonna have a deferred tax liability. Actually, I put this on the wrong side. Sorry about that. There you go. 1, 2, 3. And then here the liability will be there. So look at that. When your tax expense it's higher than your tax liability, then you have a deferred tax liability to compensate for that. When your liability is bigger than your tax expense, then you're going to have a deferred tax asset to compensate for that. Okay? So that's the definition or the topics about excuse me, the components or how to arrive on the deferred taxes. All right. Here I have a very quick example. So imagine you have the revenues. Make it more visible here. There you go. Let's say you have here the same revenues, but the depreciation expense is different. Right? The accounting asks you to depreciate 200 of that asset. The fiscal rule says you should depreciate more, 300. Therefore, your earnings before tax are going to be different, going to be higher on the accounting, lower on the fiscal. Consequently, a 20% tax will be higher for the accounting, lower for the fiscal. We have a $20 after-tax difference here. So your tax expense, look at that, your TX, right, your tax expense here, it's 160, and your tax payable, it's 140. To compensate for the low payable, you need a liability. So you need a deferred tax liability of 20 to compensate for that. That's how we do it, the deferred tax asset, deferred tax liability. Okay? So the deferred tax asset can be used to offset future tax expense. That's good. So there's value. But if the deferred tax asset, right, the deferred tax asset cannot be used to offset taxes expense in the future, then you have to create a valuation allowance the same way you create an allowance for doubtful accounts, for accounts receivable that will not be paid. It's a negative asset, it's a counter asset, and goes right below to deferred tax asset to lower that value. When the tax asset would not be able to, you cannot use the tax asset, it's when the company expects to make no profit in the near future. Then the deferred tax asset cannot be used because the deferred tax asset can only be used to offset tax payment or tax expense. If the company has no tax expense because it's going to have losses in the next years, the deferred tax asset becomes useless. Okay, there you go. All right, friends, let's finish here with the FSA with, actually, let's see, there you go. I want to talk about here, just talk about it, and if you need more explanation, I can help you, you can contact me, I can help with that. I also have the video that I made in December, right, about that one. It's the concept of amortization. So just make sure that you know, at least know how to explain the effective rate method of amortization, okay? That's an example here for you. The effective rate method, you have to do it year after year in finding that amortization. Okay, so I'm throwing there for you. And if you need more explanation on how to do the effective method, well, you can watch my other video there. Do you need to calculate the effective rate? No, I think it takes too long because each year is going to be a different amount of amortization, as you can see here. So each year you're going to have to do a calculation. It's like the depreciation, it's like the inventory. It takes too long. I do not predict a numerical question will be on that. So I put this here so just to remind you to go over the effective rate method of amortization. All right? That would be on the long-term debt, by the way. Now we're finishing here, or the topics of FSA, just reminding you about what you call the financial reporting quality. Later on, right there. And what is the quality spectrum of financial reporting quality? So it goes all the way from compliant, means using an accounting rules, either GAAP or IFRS, the decisions are useful, etc. Right? All the earnings, all the numbers are supported, it's audited, it's good to go, it's excellent quality. That's the maximum. All the way to the bottom of the bottom, which will be fictitious, inexistent transaction. So that's the accountant putting numbers there just out of the blue. That's the worst of the worst. And anything in between. Okay? I don't know, might be important. I don't know how important this is, but it might be. Okay? Let me come back here because now I have more space. Right? Let me see what else. So just take a look in here, friends. There we go. What makes the quality of the financial statement, right? So look at this. Financial reporting quality. Earnings results could be high or low, right? Depending on how the financial statement is organized. Finally, the last one is the learning module 10 is financial analysis applications. So make sure that you understand how do you as a financial analyst detect low quality earnings or problems on the financial statements, that type of thing. So you're going to have to do a revenue expense analysis, a ratio analysis, the cash flow from operations, and the net income cannot be inconsistent. You cannot have $1 million of net income and zero cash flow. I mean, you can, but that would be not good. How come you have profit and no cash, right? Because you have a lot of accounts receivable, maybe, right? But this could be a sign of poor quality, could be the sign that the company is not managing well their receipts, but could also be some kind of manipulation. So you need to be careful on that. All right, moving on to corporate issuers. Now we had some changes here, friends. All right? Corporate issuers, we had some changes. Okay, the first one is on this new structure here called corporate structure, right? This new learning module called corporate structure, excuse me. This one is new, but this one is not too complicated. I mean, it's like geopolitics. You're going to have to read and understand the terminology. I honestly don't expect a question on this one here. This is very basic corporate structure, but we never know. If you assume that if something is new could become a question, well, then you want to study this, okay? Sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, limited liability company, those are the ways to structure your business. One owner, few owners, a corporation format, and the limited liability company. What is a corporation? A corporation is a different entity, right? So if, just put in perspective, if you have a sole proprietorship or partnership and something bad happens in your business, you're liable. You, the individual, are liable for it. Well, you're going to have insurance, but you're liable. Hopefully you're going to have insurance. If it's a corporation and you're the owner of the corporation, you are not liable. The corporation will be liable for something like that. So that's an interesting point about corporation. The problem with corporation is the double taxation. The corporation gets taxed twice. Okay? Now, this reading also, learning module number 1, the corporate structure, talks about the agency problems. So I'm predicting some agency problems could be in your exam. Okay? What is an agency problem? The problems between shareholders and managers. The problem between shareholders and bondholders, right? Because they have two different ones. Okay? The most common problem is the managers, the one that are running the business, and the owner of the business. They're not running the business, but hiring those folks to manage the business for them. So that's why you need a board of directors. That's why you need a corporate governance. That's why you need all that things that you're gonna see on learning module number 2. So learning module 1 of corporate issuers, although it's new, I do not believe it's gonna be a big problem for you. Learning module 2 is an old one. It's a previous exam, like last year. So again, there's not much to say here, except that please understand what is the environmental social governance means and the types of investments that folks are doing today, investment decisions based on ESG. I put some examples here for you. Negative screening approach. It excludes non-ESG compliant investment. So if the investment is non-compliant to environmental and social governance or doesn't have one, that investor doesn't want it in a portfolio. Positive screening is asked for the broker or for the financial analyst to find only ESG investments or investments on companies that respect the environmental and social. ESG integration, which type of investment is that? Is including ESG as a criteria for asset allocation. Thematic investing, right? It's just like investing according to the ESG topics, like for example, clean energy, sustainability, etc. Engagement ownership, engagement or active ownership is companies backed by ESG shareholders. So a large group of shareholders, one person decides to buy a large stake and start to kind of putting those views into the way that the company is managed. Finally, impact investing is the companies or investments that would have positive ESG outcomes if you invest there in that company. So try to understand the terminology. I think that would be enough. Corporate governance, you need to read. That's like I said, this is not a new topic. It's an old topic. So it's examples of corporate or good governance, the examples of corporate governance, right? You need to know what is good, what's bad. So for example, the auditing committee has to be independent. The board of director has to have rotation. The board of director has to be independent. The salary committee has to be independent. The CEO, the managers, the folks or managing the company cannot participate on that salary committee, right? There is a search committee is going to be looking for a CEO or some kind of a manager. Those have to be independent. So those are examples of good corporate governance. Make sure you go over this, right? Because could be one question. This is becoming very popular lately in the investment world. CFA is actually including more ESG in level 1, level 2, and level 3. So I suspect that could be a question here as well. All right, corporate issuers 3, business models and risk. This is new as well. So what is a business model? Right? This is definitely new, but again, there's not much to explain here, because it's a very theoretical reading. If you go to the learning outcomes, there's a lot of define, explain on business model and risks. So you're going to have to define and explain the types of business models, how you can, don't confuse business structure with business model. A business structure is how you organize in terms of number of partners, and the business model is how you organize to deliver your product, right? And what is the risks involved. So a business model could be customer-oriented, product-oriented, could be channel, right? Choosing the right channel, could be price-oriented, right? Or would be called the value proposition, right? What are the types, right? The types could be an innovation, variation, e-commerce, networking, crowdsourcing, and hybrid. What are they? Well, innovation, yes, it's clear. Variation is several different products. E-commerce, gets self-explanatory. Network is just distributing to a specific network. Crowdsourcing is calling the customers to you in a way like, for example, an announcement and an event, make a big event, then everybody comes and then you make the sale there. That's called crowdsourcing model. And a hybrid would be a mix of some of those characteristics, right? It could be a business to business, could be a business to consumer. So you want to go over those business model types and imagine that the questions could be, could show up like that way. Business model financial implications, external factors, and the firm-specific factors. I would not be too worried about this one because this one is definitely in portfolio management. We're going to see systematic risk, unsystematic risk. That's more like external and firm-specific question. So I don't know if there's going to have any room to ask questions like that here. And the business risks. Risk is going to be all over your exam. I guarantee is a strong word, I'm sorry. I predict that we will have some kind of risk question on your exam, right? Especially because the risk management on portfolio management topic has been updated. We've been seeing risks on the new topic of geopolitics. We've seen risks in several other readings, so it's most likely some kind of risk question could appear on your exam, okay? All right. So that's it. That's a new. So I said to you that the class today, the session now would be focused on those new topics. But these new topics here for corporate issuers are not much. There's not much going on here. I mean, except that it was included, could become a question, but no more than one question because there's not much content that was added. If you go there and check, there's not much content, right? All right. So that's what I think would be important here, not the summary of the learning module 3, business model and risk, which is a new model, a new learning module. Now the next ones are not too new, except actually the learning module 5 is. Uses of capital, that's an easy one. This one is a classic question on corporate issuers. Is the concept of the NPV and the internal rate of return. Make sure you know what it is. Make sure, I don't think you're going to need to do calculations here, because level 2 will ask you to calculate NPV of projects. Here's going to be more like explain and define again. So define the NPV, the net present value, is the present value of all the cash flow discounted at a specific discount rate that includes risk and other factors. And the IRR is the rate of return that makes all the present value of the cash flows to be equal to the initial investment. If the cash flows, if the IRR, the internal rate of return, is much higher than the discount rate than the project requires, it's a good project. If the discount rate of the project is higher than the IRR, it's not a good project. Okay? All right. Here you want to understand the problems with IRR. Okay, the problems with IRR, okay, the internal rate of return. So negative cash flows and mutually exclusive projects will cause you should not use the IRR on those scenarios. The mutually exclusive is because you can have the wrong answer. Mutually exclusive is you only have one option to take. So to make sure that you're getting the best option, use the net present value. Now, negative cash flows is when the stream of cash flows coming, we will include some negative cash flows. So the first 5 years you get positive cash flows, then you're going to get a negative cash flows on year 6, and then more positive cash flows. If this happens, you cannot use the IRR. And the explanation is on this graph here. Every time that there is a negative cash flow, the graph of the IRR touches the x-axis at least in 2 points. And if it touches in at least 2 points, you have at least 2 IRRs. And because you have more than one, then which one you're going to use? So that's a problem. Okay. Another thing that this corporate issuers learning module 5 says is the real options that you could have in a project. So just explain that. What is a time option? What is a size option? Flexibility and fundamental option on a project. So time option, for example, you can abandon the project after 2 years, or you can invest more. Size, you can double the size of the plant 2 years later, or you can buy more machines. So flexibility, you can abandon the project, right? Fundamental based on the fundamental analysis. So real options related to the projects. Okay? Pitfalls, what would be negative components of the capital analysis, right? Capital allocation or investments. So inertia means not being able to do due diligence. Allocation bias, right? Do the allocation, not taking consideration the market, but something more subjective. Alternative, not considering alternatives. Pet projects, the projects that are more based on emotional reasons than economic reasons. Relying on fundamentals, just like relying on the balance sheet and the income statement to make the decisions. We know this is not totally accurate because balance sheets do not reflect market values. Forecasting errors. Okay? Now, finally, one question that I predict could be there, that's my prediction, is what is the impact on project valuation, right? Impact on project valuation, right? So if you're going to have some for example, flotation costs. What is flotation cost? Flotation cost is the cost of hiring a financial manager or some kind of a bank to issue an IPO or something like that. Any kind of costs related to a project, right? It happens in entering. The best way should you adjust the discount rate, in this case it's going to be the weighted average cost of capital, or should you adjust the net present value for flotation cost? And the answer is adjust the net present value, not the WACC. Okay? Take a look on this point. This is a well-stressed point on the learning module 4. I thought it was 5. Learning module 4. Okay? Adjusting the net present value or adjusting the discount rate for changes that happens in the life of the project. The learning module 5 changed a little bit, was updated, so now the source of capital. So here I'm gonna just focus on the source of liquidity, primary source of liquidity and secondary source of liquidity. Make sure that you understand what is primary, what is secondary. Primary is money from the company, so free cash flow, cash balance, short-term funds, cash flow management, stretching payables and things like that. Secondary source of liquidity, debt contracts, reducing interest rates, so it's kind of negotiating like more on the long-term contracts, right? Selling assets, right? And bankruptcy protection and reorganization. This is not loans, huh? This is more like negotiating something on the long term to give you more room to today to kind of manage your cash flow. Okay? They still talking about the drags and pools of liquidity. Drags means when it takes longer for you to receive. Pool of liquidity when you have sudden payments that you have to make it, right? That one. Measures of liquidity is done using the ratios. So which company is going to be has more liquidity? One is going to be able to pay their debt. Okay, so then you use the current ratio, the quick ratio, and the days in, which is a consequence of the turnover ratios. Here put an example. If the company has short payables, right, and accounts receivable, marketable securities, and they need $200,000, where they're going to find the money? So the first one is internally. So issue a long-term debt is not an option because, I mean, that's long-term. We're going to do quicker. Factoring the accounts receivable might be an option. Sell the accounts receivable for a discount. Sell your marketable securities and delay the payment of your suppliers. Instead of paying 10 days, as written here, 2% discount in 10 days. You don't pay in 10 days. Don't get the discount, pay later, but save the money to pay for that short term. So those are the cash management. So that's more or less how I think a question could be in your exam related to this new update, not new, but updated topic. All right, friends, let's do here. We take a little bit longer than I thought because it's an extensive material. So if you bear with me, staying there still, I know a few of you left. But this will be posted as well. So if you don't have time to watch until the end, well, wait until this video is posted. All right. Cost of capital, okay? This reading was not really a touch at all. So this one here, I have a video on the WACC, the weighted average cost of capital. I have the class that I taught in November for the CFA Level I exam in November. I explained this there well. So here there's not much that I'm going to spend time on. So I'm going to give this, the opportunity to go a little faster here. So if you need more on this topic here, cost of capital, okay, there is the video from November that I posted. We'll be explaining this very well there. But anyway, make sure that you understand the CAPM, the DGM as ways to find your the cost of the equity. Okay, don't ever forget that little formula of the sustainable growth rate, ROE times B. Okay. The cost of capital is the cost that you have to issue debt and raise equity. Now, by the way, cost of issuing equity is not the cost of hiring a private banking or a financial institution to raise more stocks, do the valuation. It's not that type of cost we're talking about here. We're talking about the cost that reflected by the expectations of the new shareholder. If I want to buy the stock of your company, I demand X% return. That's the cost of the equity. How this is measured? We use the CAPM, C-A-P-M. Okay. All right. So flotation costs that I want to mention too. That's new topic, and I predict something on flotation costs on your exam. Okay, because that's part of the new update. So flotation cost is underwriting cost, cost of hiring someone to issue an IPO or issue more stocks. What is the formula? I don't think you need to know, but you need to understand. Dividend divided by price minus the flotation cost plus the growth rate. Okay. In the adjustment that you do, right? You take the value, how much we spent on the flotation cost, take the present value, and then you subtract from the NPV. This was well stressed on the reading. I believe that this could be a question on your exam. The last one here, moving on to the next topic, is the beta, comparable beta. This could be a question as well. If you don't have the beta of a company, how do you find that beta on the market? So you look for a comparable beta of a company in the same industry that has a beta. Take that, unleverage that beta, divided by 1 plus the DE ratio, and then that's called unlevered beta. And then you take that beta and then you leverage that beta with the other DE ratio of the company that you're looking for, right? So deleverage and then leveraged again. Deleverage means divided by 1 plus the DE ratio after tax, and leveraged again is multiplying by the 1 plus the DE ratio times 1 minus tax. Okay, beta, comparable beta. Yep, could be a question there, for sure. All right, next. Capital structure, we have very little change here. Actually, I don't think not much. I saw very little update. So this is the M&M propositions. So I'm going to focus on the M&M propositions here. M&M proposition 1 with no taxes. So M&M proposition no taxes means the value of the unleveraged firm equals the value of the leveraged firm. So there's no capital structure here. It's irrelevant. You can funding all the project with debt, fund all your project with equity, doesn't matter. The value of both companies will be the same if there's no taxes in that environment. Now, M&M proposition 2 with taxes and without taxes is pretty much the same thing. Means that if the company start borrowing too much, the cost of the equity will increase. That's what the proposition 2 says. Okay, so this has a tendency to show on level 2 as well, because you're going to have to remember this there. But maybe an M&M proposition question will be in your exam. I don't know. Okay, so here I put in kind of like a, what do you call, a summary for you. Modigliani Miller proposition 1, without taxes, the leveraged firm equals the unleveraged firm value. With taxes, different. With taxes, you have a benefit to issue debt because you're going to have tax deductibles. So the value of the leverage is higher than the value of the unleveraged by the tax times the debt. That component, tax times debt, that's how much you're going to get back from the government. And that value, the company that doesn't borrow will not have. Therefore, the company that borrows will have a little bit extra value because of that. That's M&M 1 with taxes. M&M 2 is that if you increase the debt, you increase the required return on the equity. With taxes, it's just that it's going to increase a little bit less because that is tax deductible, so you have to multiply by 1 minus t. But the logic is the same. Increase that, increase the cost of the equity. What is the optimal target capital structure? Is the one that minimizes the WACC, minimize the weighted average cost of capital. Okay. What does affect that? Debt ratings. So if the company has AAA rating, it's going to borrow for less than the company has BBB. So that would affect the capital structure, the cost of capital, book value versus market value, market conditions, and any asymmetric information. Now this one here, Learning Module 7, talks again about conflicts. So if it talks again about conflicts, it gives me the clue the conflicts might be something that you need to be worried about in the exam. Or called agency conflicts. Manager versus shareholders. Preferred shareholders with common shareholders. They have different ones. Debt versus equity. So creditors versus shareholders. Private equity investors versus controlling shareholders. So that's the one we have minority shareholders, but they can get together and then they can go and chase or face or even throw the power of some people, some folks that have a controlling shareholder. Of course, if you have 50% plus one share, then you have full control. But in real life, that's not the case. Banks and private lenders and other stakeholders. So take a look on those agency conflicts. Try to explain each one of them and the impact of those conflicts we'll have. All right. Measures of leverage here, friends. Okay, it's important. There's no change on measures of leverage, so this one here is pretty much what it was on last year. So what I want you to understand is the degrees of leverage. So let's talk about that here. There's two graphs in front of you. Leverage I'm talking about here are operating leverage and financial leverage, and consequently total leverage. So operating leverage means you have, the more fixed cost you have, the more operating leverage you have. So take a look on those graphs here. The first graph, the fixed cost and the dotted line down here, it's very low. On the second graph, on the dotted line, the fixed cost is much higher, right? It's way up there. Look what happened. The company has low fixed cost. We have a break even, where you see this, these two lines crossing is the break even, where cost, which is the red line, equals the revenue, which is the green line. When they meet on that point, determines the break even point. That break even point is much sooner for the company has no fixed cost, and is later for the company has fixed cost. That's one distinction. Second, look at the amplitude, right? The space between revenue and cost on the company that has low fixed cost. Very little. Although they break even first, they have very little profit margin compared with the company that has fixed cost. The company that has fixed cost will take a while to break even, but once it breaks even, the amplitude of profit is bigger. So those are the consequences you need to understand about degrees of or leverage. Now, what is degree of financial leverage? Well, degree of financial leverage is when the company borrows money and has to pay fixed interest, right? So that's degree of financial leverage. When you multiply degree of operating leverage, I'm going to make it a little smaller here. There you go. When you multiply DOL times DFL, then you get the DTL, right? DTL. So could be a very easy question you're going to face there, or complicated, I don't know. Okay, but there you go. There's no change here on this. The other formula that you need to know is the break-even, right there. Break-even analysis. There's two break-even formulas: operating break-even and the normal break-even, right? The total break-even. The difference is operating break-even only use operating fixed cost represented by F, and the break-even, the total, includes the fixed cost and the financial costs, F plus C on the numerator. So might be a good idea to memorize those two formulas here, okay? The break-even and the operating break-even. All right, let's move to equity now, friends. Okay, let's move to equity. Okay, so no change here, no drastic change. So I'm going to cover this a little quicker as well. Okay, from now on, right, all the way until the portfolio management, we'll have very little changes. So it's going to be pretty much what I'm going to say here is what I said on the other video that I did in November. So this one is going to allow me to go quick. So I would say half an hour more, and then I'm done with the video, okay, for those that are still with me. So market organization structure has no change. So here I put for you a list of words that you need to be comfortable. That goes more for the folks that don't speak English as a first language, right, that they are following and you're taking the exam. You need to know, if you work in the United States, or if you read the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and all those, you're probably very comfortable with those words. But if you're not, then I would take a look, use the dictionary, make sure you know the definition of each one of those. Could be very helpful in the exam. As part of this, again, this is material from the last year, so there's not much change. Margin call, make sure you know. Make sure that you know how to calculate the price of an instrument that will trigger a maintenance margin or a margin call. Okay, what is a margin call? What is the maintenance margin? What is the required margin? What is the initial margin? Those could be all questions. Financial leverage ratio. Okay, so financial leverage ratio is very good, a very good tool that can amplify your return. Instead of investing 100%, you can invest a portion of it only. So that's called borrowing on margin or investing on margin. So this is going to create higher return. So for example, if you have a leverage ratio of 2.5, that means that any return you would make without the margin, a normal return, I put all the money there and then I made it some back, that return will be multiplied by the leverage ratio. So if I made 10% return investing the whole amount, I would get 25% return if I had invested only 40% of that amount. Right? So try to understand what this leverage ratio means. Okay? So the leverage return is the normal return times the financial leverage, or the leverage ratio. Okay? All right. That's, in my opinion, the most important points of the learning module 1. Now that we leave the market structure, go to market indices. This is no change here at all. So again, I'm going to go quick, but remind you, I think this could be questions on your exam on indices. So make sure you know what a price weighting, equal weighting, market cap, float, and fundamental weighting methods to build an index mean. Please, okay? What is the key characteristics, the key differences, the problems, the pros, the positive side, the negatives, etc. Okay? So for example, the market cap use the market cap ratio of each company. So the number of shares times the price. This can easily deviate from your targets. That could be a problem. The equal weighted requires a lot of balancing, constant balance. The price weighting has a problem with the stock splits, right? The fundamental weighting has the problems of deviation, or the tilts as they call. And the float adjusted market weight is the one that only includes shares available for sale, not all the shares. Other than that, it's very similar to the market cap. All of them has pros and cons, okay? Here I have a quick example for you of the price weighted adjusting the denominator for stock split. Could be a question. So very quickly here, let's do it. If I have 3 stocks on my index, stock A, B, and C, that's the price of each one. I could care less the quantity because I'm doing a price index here. So just take the price. Add those price, right? I had 42 here, okay? Then divided by 3 because I have 3 shares, right? 3 stocks in my portfolio because I don't have the number of shares. I just take the price and divide it by the number of stocks. So that's going to be equal to 42 divided by 3. So my index is 14. That's the value of my index, 14. Now look what happened here. One day later, or I don't know, sometime later, stock B split 3-1. So it was $12. Now I have 3 more shares, which doesn't matter here because we're not analyzing the number of shares. But the price went down 3 times. Now it's $4 instead of $12. So I cannot add now those 3 and divide it by 3. I can't do that because if I do that, I would have 34 divided by 3. And my index will be 11. But my index should not be 11 because the $4 did not go down because the company performed poorly. No, it becomes 4 because they tripled the number of shares, so there's no change in this. So therefore, your index should have no change. Your index should be still 14. How do you force your index to be 14? Well, which number divided by 34 gives you 14? So you adjust the denominator of the price index, right? So I need a number that divided by 34 gives me 14. So remember, the denominator here was 3. It's 42 divided by 3 because I have 3 stocks. But now I need to adjust the denominator to figure it out how to get 14 there. So it's going to be equal to 34 divided by 14. And that's my new denominator, 2.43. Okay? So instead of 3, the denominator is adjusted so the index does not lose the value because of a stock split, because technically it should not lose value or gain value because a stock split or reverse stock split, right? Stock split should not alter the value of the index. There you go, friends. So that's the explanation. I found this is important. A lot of my clients, a lot of my students, a lot of the people that look for my help to study for the exam have questions related to the price index. All right. Make sure you know how to use indexes because you're going to be tested on level 3 heavily on that. So make sure that you already do yourself a favor and start getting comfortable with indexes. So to get a market sentiment, to kind of analyze how the market is going, the index is good. It's a benchmark. Benchmark here needs to be combined. There you go. Benchmark for risk and return, benchmark for asset classes, benchmark. Benchmark is the key word here, right? Because you need to measure performance. Use a benchmark. You need to measure return, adequate return or not. Use a benchmark. Indexes are good for that. So S&P 500, Dow Jones, the FT, SE, even like in Brazil they have the Bovespa index, right? So all of those are indices you can use to compare. You can use as a benchmark. Now quick here, because could be a question but low probability, is the type of index we have there. So we have equity index for stocks. You have multi-market sector style indexes. So if you invest in growth stocks, if you invest in value stocks, you're going to have index for that. You're going to have fixed income indexes like those, financial, the FTSE, bond index, so have all of those. Do we need to memorize those? I don't think so. Not for level 1. Just put it here for your information. We have index for alternative investments, commodity indexes, hedge fund indexes, and real estate indexes. Okay, so there we go. All right, let's go to market efficiency now. Okay, so market structure, indexes, efficiency. And then we're going to have 4, 5, and 6, because now it's three learning modules of equity. Starts on the macro, right? The industry and in the country, the market itself. After that, number 4, 5, and 6, we go down to the industry, and 5 and 6, learning modules 5 and 6, we go down to the company level. So market efficiency, here you need the efficiency hypothesis. So again, weak format, semi-strong form, strong form. What are they? So weak form, there's no public information available, there's no private information available. On the semi-strong, there's no private information available. On the strong form, all the information available. So that's the most efficient one. Make sure you know which kind of investments should you do in each one of those type of markets. If it's passive investment, technical analysis investment, or fundamental analysis investment, or active management, okay? Here could have some questions on market anomalies, market pricing anomalies, right? So understand what an anomaly is. It's something that happens, right? That just we have no control of, like a bubble, like something, like people start overbuying every time that's raining. You know, that's an anomaly, but how will you explain that, right? So the types of anomalies you have divided in 3 categories: time series, cross-sectional, others. And there's some examples: January effect, holiday, size, value. I find this very American terminology. And because the CFA exam is a global exam, I do not expect the word Super Bowl to be written on the CFA exam. Because it's not everybody in the world that knows what Super Bowl means. So I don't know at which extent. I think they'll be very careful when they're using the vocabulary to make sure that, for example, they don't. I don't think the CFA use the word Federal Reserve on the exams. They're going to use the word central bank because that's more applicable to everybody, right? The majority of candidates taking this exam today are not from the United States anymore. It used to be. So the exam is very much globalizing, including the vocabulary, the examples, right? So I do not expect. I put it here just to remind you that this is there. I do not expect this to be there much. This reading finishes with, this module finishes with behavioral finance, talking about loss aversion, herding, overconfidence, information cascade. This is all going to be on the reading 52, learning module 6, I believe, now, for portfolio management. And this is going to be big time on level 3. Level 3, you're going to have to know all about behavioral finance. Okay, so my perspective here on having a question on this is very low. All right. Now we're going to the industry analysis in learning module 5, and then 6, it's learning module for the company. So there will be like valuation. Again, no change here. So the industry analysis, you need to know, if you're doing a top-down approach, you go to the country, then you go to the industry, then you go to the stock. Now in the industry, what do you need? Which kind of analysis do you do there? So understand the environment, okay? I'm not gonna buy stocks in a company that's facing heavy competition. Why not? Well, because the prospect of growth is small, right? Am I investing in a company where the industry is very young, very new, is an industry with a lot of potential of growth? So that's why I need to do an industry analysis, okay? So this could be a question on which one of those, or which category would be called the industry classification. So I don't know, I put it there just in case, okay? So consumer staples is a supermarket. Utilities will be an energy provider. So these are the categories, and that's the type of business on each category. Another thing that this learning module talks about is the Porter 5 forces. Make sure that you understand, that's all you need is understand. Bargain power of buyers, bargain power of suppliers, threat of new entrants, threat of substitution, rivalry among the members. So you do this analysis, because if this is too much, look, I'm gonna go I'm gonna buy stocks in a company, I want to buy stocks in that company that's in an industry where I have a lot of bargain power of buyers, meaning the buyers tell the seller how much they want to pay, more or less. That doesn't mean that the company might make too much. There's no room too much profits to be made when the bargain is on the hands of the buyers. But when the bargain is in the hand of the supplier, and I'm investing my money on the supplier, then it might be interesting. Okay? If there's no threat of new entrants, or that there's a heavy barriers against the entrants, that might be a good industry to invest on that particular company in that industry. Right? Substitution is the same idea. Right? And rivalry is, if you have rivalry, you could have price wars between three companies in the same industry. That's terrible for the investor, because price war reduce the revenue, reduce the profit, reduce the earnings, reduce the dividends, right? So that's why the Porter 5 forces is important. Here I put the industry life cycle model. Make sure that you understand. I already explained in economics, business cycle. Now you mean the industry life cycle, and then you have the company cycle. The industry life cycle has the embryonic, growth, shakeout, maturity, decline. And one question could be, they give you a little characteristics, and you have to tell which stage of the industry life cycle it is. Okay, so I would pay attention on that. Learning module 6 is equity valuation. That's the company. That's the company. Now we're going to use some techniques. Again, you don't need to do any calculation here. You just need to explain. You need to know. You need to be able to comfortably explain actually all of those methods of evaluation. On level 2, you're going to have to show that you know how to calculate the value. But level 1, it's less on that. So equity valuation, the first one is the discounted cash flow models. Make sure you understand what it is. It's just take all the cash flows and bring to the future. Market multiples is the comparison, right? So we have the PE, the PV, the P, the price per sale, price per book, price per cash flow, price per earnings of 3, 4, 5 companies, the average of the industry. So you can use that to compare if the company that you are analyzing is overvalued or undervalued. The enterprise value is a kind of a price multiple, but instead of using the price, the market price of the company, use the enterprise value of the company. Enterprise value is the market value of the equity plus the market value of the debt minus cash of the company. Asset-based valuation, then you're going to have to just look on the assets of the company minus the liabilities, and that's going to be the valuation. Now, what will be a question here that probably not going to be in your exam, because a lot of finance books ask this question, is the following. For which type of company the asset-based valuation model is not indicated? Answer, for the companies that have a lot of intangible assets. When you have a lot of intangible assets, it's difficult to value the company. All right, friend, those are the formulas. So don't forget your discount models, right? You definitely could have some calculations to be done here, okay? Not the cash flow discount model. This is level 2, but the dividend growth model might be there. Make sure that you know that's D1 divided by R minus G. If the problem gives you D0, the current dividend, you have to grow that dividend one period and then divided by R minus G. I hope you remember that, okay? That's called the Gordon model. That's called one-stage model. But A company might decide to pay dividends in 3 stages. So the dividends are going to grow 20% for the next 5 years, then the dividends are going to grow 15% for the next 3 years, and then the dividends are going to stabilize at 5% growth forever. That's a 3-stage. Okay, I have a video on my YouTube channel just on that. Okay, so if you want to watch. That video is not in English, by the way. Okay, for the audience here that in English, that one. Well, you can put some kind of translator. I guess that could work. All right. What else? So multi-stage or multiple stage dividend model. Okay. Or look at an example. The current dividend D0 is 5. Growth is expected to be 10% a year for 3 years, and then 5% thereafter. So it's a 2-stage model, right? The required return is 15%. Estimate the intrinsic value of the company. Well, you're going to have to do the dividends for the next 3 years. They're going to grow one by one. And then the other dividends are going to grow at the Gordon model. Then you have to do the present value of all those amounts. Okay? Follow the example in the book or watch the video that I made on the multi-stage dividend model. And I explained there. Multiplier models, okay? The multiplier models, that's going to be heavy on level 2. So level 1, try to understand what they mean. So you have the price to sales, price to book. They have the leading price to earnings or just price to earnings, or PE, price to cash flow, and enterprise value to EBITDA or EBITDA. If you rearrange those formulas, you get the price of a company could be equal to the earnings per share times a multiplier. The price of a company could be the book value per share times another multiplier, or the value of the company, price of the company, the share, could be the earnings per share times a multiplier, cash flow times a multiplier, EBITDA times a multiplier. That's what we call price multiples. So you can figure it out, the fair price of a company using that. Just a comment here that this is level 1 question. When a company would prefer to use the price to sales versus the price to earnings. The PE ratio is the most used one. Actually, I'm going to put just the normal PE ratio there. It's P divided by E. So the PE ratio is the most used one, but when a company would not use the PE ratio, or a financial analyst would not use, well, earnings can be negative. So because earnings can be negative, that could be a problem. To do evaluation with negative earnings. Price to sales, it's never negative, because the price of stock is always positive and sales are always positive. So that's why sales are never negative, so that's appealing to use the price to sales. All right, spending a little bit more time than I expected, but that's okay, I don't want to rush. Enterprise value, already explained what it is. Market value debt, market value equity minus cash. Asset-based valuation, not good for a company that has intangibles, right? Lots of intangibles. That's not a good method. Well, friends, here I have a couple examples, but I'm not going to go over the examples because you can go over those examples, right, on using the material. All right, let's go to fixed income. There's no change on fixed income. So fixed income, I'm just going to go quick as well. Again, if you need more, you can use the video that I did in November, right, to complement that. So some vocabulary, okay, for those, especially for those that don't speak English as a first language, take a look on those, make sure you understand what each one of those means, okay? Not necessarily going to be in your exam, but could. Let's see what else we have here that's important. Yeah, let me actually going to make it a little more visible. There you go. So look at that. Common forms of internal credit enhancement. What is a credit enhancement? It's to make sure that you can borrow at a lower rate. So you can do subordination, over collateralization. So make sure that you understand what this is. You can do subordination. You can put like different, say the seniors, mezzanine equity. So I have different types. So the senior is the most protected one, who's the lowest risk, right? And then you have when you can do the lower one, the senior is the most secure one. Then you have the subordinated or the unsubordinated loan. So again, you have several different methods. I took myself out of the video here because I want you to see a little bit better this one. All right. So what else we have here? Euro bonds, make sure you know what it is Euro bonds. Make sure you know the difference between an Euro bond and a foreign bond. Okay, Euro bond, foreign bond. Example foreign bonds are here. Okay. Make sure you know what a convertible bond is. Make sure it's conversion price, conversion ratio, conversion value, and conversion premium. That's all explained right here for you. You don't need to do calculations, like I said. Again, when I say you don't need it, it's just my opinion. Right? Most likely you won't. But most likely you need to explain things on this level 1 exam. Okay? Most likely. All right, let's see if I can come back. I'm back. There we go. Perfect. Let's continue. Here I already mentioned about the fixed income index because this was fixed income market. So everything related to the fixed income market, it's on learning module 2. Again, very theoretical, no room for numerical questions here whatsoever. It's just going to be very content oriented if you get a question from this module here. So make sure that you understand the difference between primary market, secondary market, for bonds, not for equity, for bonds, private placement, over the counter, open market operations, from the Federal Reserve or the central banks in general. Understand what's a short-term debt finance, so the zero coupon bonds or the treasury bills, commercial paper, make sure you know what it is. Commercial paper is a short-term loan. Repo agreement is a short-term loan, right? Repo agreement is like pounds, right? You go there, leave it something there with the promise of coming back and buy it back, okay? You also have the reverse repo agreement, which is the opposite, right? And then you have long-term bets. I think this is all fine here. Structured financial instruments, I'm going to have an entire module to talk about that for the asset-backed securities, collateralized mortgage obligation, collateralized debt obligations. Right? Let's see the next one. Bond pricing valuation. Yes, here you could face numerical questions, analytical questions, high probability. Right? You could have high probability here, okay, of facing numerical questions. So let's be careful here. Okay. So let's see. Now, the calculation that you might face is you're going to use the calculator, obviously, but it's important that you understand what's behind the scenes, how you calculate the price of a bond. So the price of a bond are the cash flows of the bond, as you can see here, PMT, payment, discounted by the respective rate, and in the end, you get your face value back. So make sure you understand how the bond pays the investor, okay? Because then helps you to understand how to price a bond, because that's what this component is, price and valuation. Right. For example, which bond is going to lose more value? Which bond is going to gain more value or lose less value, right? Gain value, lose value, etc., depending on the scenario. So, for example, in this case here, we have a bond that has a coupon rate of 6, both bonds, except the one is 10-year and the other one is 3-year. Which of those bonds are more sensitive to interest rates? The longer bond, the longer bond. So, high maturity, it's riskier than low maturity. Now, high coupon, it's less risky than low coupon. If a bond pays a very high coupon, then there's less risk of changing value if compares the bond that pays low interest. So if a bond pays 1% interest, that bond will lose more value than the bond that pays 15% interest every year. Okay? I think that's logical. Here, reminding you that all bonds, the bonds issued at par is the green one. The bond issued at premium will be in the blue line, and the bond issued at discount will be in the red line. All bonds converge to face value and maturity because, well, imagine that 1 second before you receive the face value, the last cash flow is the face value. 1 second before you receive the face value, you sell the bond. How much the person is gonna pay for your bond? Well, the face value. It's exactly what the person is gonna receive, and that's it. The bond is gonna mature. So that's why all bonds converge to the face value. Premium or discount bonds will converge to the face value at the end. That's why you have to amortize premiums and discount in accounting, as you mentioned in the previous learning module. Look, this is a little bit tricky, but I want to comment here. Pricing bonds using spot rate. So what you do is each year you're going to use the spot rate of that year. So a bond pays 5% for 3 years. The bond is going to pay 5, 5, and then 100. And then 5, 5, and then 100. So 5 on the first year, 5 on the second year is 105 on the third year. Discount by the spot rate of each year and find the price. Once you found the price, you will replace the price on a calculator, and then you find the rate that's common for making those cash flows equal to the price. That's called the yield to maturity. So the yield to maturity is like an average of the spot rates. Matrix pricing, I'm not going to go over in much details because, like I said, I have another video on that, but the matrix pricing might be interesting because it's a way to compute the price of a bond that you don't observe in the market. So it's a way to do an interpolation. Okay, I don't think it's super heavy content. Again, we don't, for the sake of the time of the video, I'm not going to go over in details, but again, you could go over, pause the video, read the example, then you should be fine. Here, I just put it for your information, but I seriously don't think that you're going to have to worry about the price of the floater. There you go. The floater price. But if you need it, a floater is a bond that changes coupons every payment. So is the index is the reference plus a what do you call a reset margin, right? Which is an extra, so LIBOR plus 0.5%, LIBOR plus 1%, that's your coupon, okay? And then you discount that by the respective interest rate based on the index. It's difficult to price a floater. It's time consuming to price a floater. I do not expect this question to be there, but I put it here to make sure that you remember or at least know what it is. So right there for you, that's the definitions, not each one of them. Right. I'm finishing here with the treasury yield curve, okay, because we're going to talk about duration now in the next module. The treasury yield is the interest rate versus maturity. So the longer the maturity, the higher the interest rate, you have an up curve, right? But if the higher the maturity, the lower the interest rate, then you have an inverted curve. So the green curve is inverted, the blue curve here in my example is the normal yield curve. Okay, the shape. Okay. Now also remember that you could have parallel shifts on the yield, right? So for example, this yield, the blue curve could go that way. Look, could do this, right? Could go up or could go down, up or down. And in those cases, up or down, that would cause changes on a bond portfolio, right? The portfolio can lose value if the interest rate go up, or the portfolio bonds can gain value if the interest rate goes down. So that's called managing a portfolio of fixed income, right? So you need to understand how to immunize the risks or minimize the risk of your portfolio. I mentioned here the implied forward rates. Take a look on the reading how to calculate implied forward rates, but I think it's going to be more useful for level 2. I'm not going to have time to do that here, an example, because I also don't think it's super testable, and I also it's also because it was a component of the last exam. Spreads, again, and no change. The G spread, the Z spread, and the O option adjusted spread. Make sure you know how to explain those 3 types of spreads. Okay, G spread has to do with the government bonds. Z spread is the volatility, is to make the price of the bond equals to the market price. Option adjusted spread is only for callable and puttable bonds. Make sure you understand that. Here I'm giving an example how to calculate the spread, Z spread, but I doubt you're going to have to do the calculation because that requires trial and error, right, most of the time. But that's it, so the spread. So if you need more, obviously, right, you're going to check the book, right, you're going to see other things to understand, because, you know, don't rely on this review session to learn things. This is, like I said, it was a review. Things that is not clear yet, then you're going to review a little bit more depth later. All right, continuing. All right, and now here, bond number, learning module 5 is bond risk and return. So here we're talking about duration. Here we're talking about reinvestment of coupons at the yield to maturity. So every coupon you reinvested at the yield, if you're able to reinvest each coupon at the yield to maturity, you'd earn the yield to maturity as the return overall after that investment it's matured. So remember that could be a question. Duration, how you measure duration. You have several types of duration. Macaulay duration is going to be big on level 3. Macaulay duration measures the best time to hold the bond to minimize price risk and interest risk. So Macaulay duration is measured on time. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. That's the only duration that's measured on time, with time units. All the other durations are sensitivity measures, except Macaulay duration is also a sensitivity measure, but is measured in years. The other ones are not measured in years, okay? So the name duration, it's because of the Macaulay duration, but all the other durations borrow the name duration, but duration means sensitivity to interest rates. That's what duration means. All right, Macaulay duration is the best point to hold the bond. Modified duration is if the yield to maturity of the bond changes, what happened to the bond price. That's called modified duration. Is the sensitivity of the bond towards its change in the YTM. Effective duration is the sensitivity of the bond if all interest rates change, like a parallel shift on the yield curve as I showed it to you before. And key rate duration is the duration that measures the change on individual maturities. So the 5-year bond, the 10, the 20, how much each one is going to change if the interest rate changes. That's the key rate duration. Okay, the key rate duration is curve shape. Okay, those are the formulas. Modified duration is Macaulay duration divided by 1 plus the YTM, or modified duration could be the PV minus, which will be the price of the bond if the interest goes down, minus the price of the bond if the interest rate go up. That difference goes in the numerator, divided by 2 divided by the change in the yield to maturity times the price at initiation. Notice that the effective duration and the modified duration has exactly the same formula. The only thing is that change is that one is the change in the YTM and the other one is the change in the curve. All the yields. That's it. All right. Here I'm just going to show something that's important here for you, is that callable bonds have negative convexity, and that's the graph here. You see that the graph of a normal bond is a convex. It looks like a shape like a letter C, right? But a callable bond will be when the interest rates start going down, it kind of shapes like a concave, not convex, but concave. So that's what we call negative convexity. It's the only bond that exhibits negative convexity is the callable bond. Because when the interest rates are very low, the bond will be called. So nobody's gonna bet that the bond is gonna go up in value. So the bond will have negative convexity. So I put those here to explain to you what convexity means. So duration of the portfolio, you need to know how to measure, not calculate, but I would say explain. Calculate the portfolio yield to maturity. Use the yield to maturity to calculate the Macaulay duration, and then use the Macaulay duration to calculate the modified duration. That's usually the process that we do here. Okay? Effective duration you only use if all the yield change at the same time. If only one yield change, modified duration will be better. Convexity, you should memorize those formulas. Approximate convexity is the change on the yield. Effective convexity is the change on the yield curve, but the formula is pretty much the same. Convexity is the second derivative, so that's why it's like squared. You're always going to have a square, yield squared on the convexity formula. Finally, friends, here, don't confuse convexity with convexity adjustment. The convexity adjustment is right here on this green rectangle that I highlighted here. The percentage change of a bond is equal to the duration times the change on the interest rate, plus, you have to memorize that, because if you face this question there, if you don't memorize this formula, then you can answer. Well, I mean, you can guess, but plus half of the convexity times the change in the interest rate squared. So that component, you add it into the duration to figure out the change on the bond. Okay, so go, if this is still a little blurry for you, just go over adjustment for convexity or convexity adjustment. I have an example here that you can digest it later. Right? Pause the video when I post and then go over. All right. Here, risk again, I just mentioned interest rate risk and investment horizon. What is that? So if your investment horizon is too long, you might face more reinvestment risk. If your horizon and your time to invest is less, it's a little bit lower. Right, last module of fixed income, friends, and then you go to derivatives. Derivatives, I have an entire video on it. So derivatives, I'm going to go very quick here because I have the previous video, like 2 videos before this one is going to be posted. It was a 3-hour video only on the derivatives. So I'm going to skip here. I'm just going to mention quick, but I'm going to refer you to that video at the end of this video for you to have more information. So the last one here talks about credit analysis, and it's going to be big on level 2. So here I just expect maybe a conceptual question on credit risk. What is credit risk, right? So credit risk has 2 components called default risk, the probability of default, right? And the loss severity. So given that there is a 5% probability of losing, how much would be that loss? So that's how credit risk is measured. On level 2, you're going to have to quantify that risk. Okay. Now, risks involved with fixed income are credit, market, interest, liquidity, downgrade risk, and spread risk. Again, risk is going to be big, in my opinion, on that exam. The concept of risk, all sorts of different type of risks. So how do you minimize the risk of fixed income? You can do a seniority ranking. You can put senior bonds, mezzanine, equity bonds, or junior bonds. So the junior has more risk. The senior subordinated has more risk than the senior. The senior unsubordinated has more risk than the senior subordinated. So it's important for you to know which bonds are more secure than the other, because you might get a little table, bond A, bond B, bond C, and then bond B is unsecured, bond B is secured, and then you have to see which one has more credit risk. So easy question, but if you don't know those definitions, you wouldn't be able to answer. Here's talking about the recovery rates. This means if the company goes on default, what is the order? So the priority of claims, right? It's not always absolute, but we know first is the creditors, then is the preferred shareholders, and then the common shareholders. But under the creditors, who gets the money first, right? So I think it's a good idea to give to read this just in case. Okay? Let me see if there's anything. This is also big on level 2, but since it was material for level 1, I mentioned here. How do you do credit analysis, right? The banks or financial institutions or anyone that's trying to buy a bond from a corporation or something, right? Usually for the government, you don't do that extensive because governments usually have more power to pay their debt than a company will have. So you use the 4 C's, right? The capacity, collateral, covenant, and character. How do you measure capacity? You do ratios. Coverage ratio, interest coverage ratio that you learn is EBIT divided by interest expense. The more EBIT, the more coverage you have. Collateral means what the assets that you can pledge if in case you don't pay your debt, what can we take from you? That's your collateral. Covenant is the promises. I will not pay dividends for the next 10 years. I will not incur any debt for the next 10 years. Those are called negative covenants. Or I will increase sales, I will do this, I will make this happen. This is positive covenants. Those are the promises. And character is the ratings, right? AAA, AA, triple B, etc. Okay? So when you, financial analysts, do an analysis like that on the 4 C's, you're going to have an idea which issuer is more riskier than the other, which one has more credit risk than the other. Okay? So the ratio analysis will be profitability ratios, leverage ratio, and coverage ratios. All right. I did not mention much here, friends. Let me see. Asset-backed securities, right? The asset-backed securities. I think that I skipped that, but if I did, yeah. Let me talk about that quick because I skipped that one. Okay, I don't want you to not understand that they will not be there because this will be on your exam. ABS, asset-backed securities. Understand what it is. Understand what's a pooling of interest or is. Pool of interest. So you have literally you have a pool, and in there you put it several different mortgage payments or payments for some kind of loan. So imagine mortgage. I put like 100 mortgage inside that pool, and I divided those mortgages according to risk. So the first 100 mortgage here are from people that always paid on time. So this is secured mortgage, but the other ones down here are from people that already defaulted before. Those are risky mortgages. Oh, so you separated them. Then you take the stream of payments. So the person pays the bank, the banks passes through the payment passes through to the pool. In that pool, it's canalized, right? It's channel, right? You got a channel to go to the respective investor. That's what an asset-backed security is. So if I'm an investor that don't like risk, then I'm going to buy an asset mortgage security from a portion of the pool that comes only for lenders and payers who have good credit. So I know they're not going to default. But if I like a little bit more risk, then I'm going to be content in getting the stream of payments coming from the pool that comes from from lenders, right? Mortgage payers. They're not that they have not that good reputation of paying back. So that's how they do the backed securities. Okay, so try to understand the mechanism of that. Okay, this is well explained on my other video. So again, I'm not going to spend much time here because I said I was going to focus only on the changes, right? So we have the special purpose entity that has to be created to be the go-between in the institution and the pool and the investors, right? Here we have the types of mortgages, type of collateralized securities, the type of ABS, asset-backed securities. That's the generic name. Mortgage-backed securities is a type of ABS. And here I want to just focus on how companies will kind of like minimize the risk for those investors. So that's called the collateralized mortgage obligation, or CMOs is a good example. So CMOs create structures. All the way on the top is very secure, all the way in the bottom it's risky. So if the risky ones goes away, the ones on top are still protected, right? So that's the collateralized mortgage obligation works that way. Okay. All right. I think that's it. So again, this has chances to be in your exam, ABSs or CDOs, CMOs. Make sure you really go over those, right? At least the definitions. All right. Derivatives, friend, I'm not going to spend much time on derivatives, like I said, because there's a video of 3 hours only on derivatives. So I'm going to skip that. Just reminding you, derivatives has changed. We have 100 pages more on the topic. It's not too much more. It was because a lot of people thought, oh my God, now it was 2 modules, now it's 10 modules, which is true. Last year only have 2 modules or 2 readings, 45 and 46. Now we have 10 modules, but each module has like 20 pages, 30 pages. So in the end, you're gonna have 100 pages more than you had it before. So I said on the other video, focus on price and valuation, describing how to price and evaluate most of those securities, how to price a future, how to price a forward, how to price a swap, an option, right? Describe the binomial model, right? Describe it, the process, describe, not calculate, describe how you compute the price of an equity swap or a currency swap, right? Describe the risks involved. So again, it's more on the description that the CFA Institute put those learning modules for the CFA exam for 2023 regarding derivatives. Okay, so it's very conceptual, very little calculation. I would expect maybe maximum one analytical problem on derivatives. Okay, because the most is going to be on definitions. So really go over that. Okay, And like I said, I have a 3-hour video only on this. Almost in the end here, friends. So yeah, it took longer than I thought. Well, that's all right. This is alternative investment. There's no change on the alternative investment. So that's going to be pretty much what it was before. So it's just reorganized a little bit, but the content is pretty much the same. So focus on the types of alternative investment: hedge funds, private equity, real estate, commodities, and infrastructure. And then other types are art, coins, stamps, wine, but that's irrelevant, right? Those are the types. Focus on hedge funds and private equity. They usually show up more. Commodities too, okay? They have a tendency to appear more often in mock exams. So I would say maybe could be more chances to be on your exam. So what are hedge funds? The type of hedge fund strategies, very important, right? Private equity, try to describe private equity. So I'm putting here for you very slowly so you can read it. There you go. Make it a little smaller and you can all fit there. So there you go. That explains the leverage buyout, venture capital, distressed investing in distressed securities, right? For example, Bed Bath & Beyond, right? It was on the news the other day, has just been, there was almost out of business and then got a coup de grace of a hedge fund that decided to invest in, and I think there was $800 million, the full loan, or the full deal, right, to help Bed Bath & Beyond to get out of this situation that they are in, right? It's a retailer in the United States. That's an example of distress investing. And I imagine if the hedge fund put that much money into that company, it's because they're seeing some kind of return. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. I expected that. Real estate. And make sure that you know how to invest in real estate, the types of investments in real estate. No calculations here, friend. Calculations for real estate, level 2. Then you're going to have to calculate the value of an apartment building with vacancy and this cost and this and that. Here is more the explanation, the definitions, the concepts. Real estate valuation, how do you do it? Here is how do you do it. And then level 2, demonstrate and calculate the value. Comparable sales, income approach, which is the preferable. They measure how much money that real estate asset will give, and then they do the present value of those. And the cost approach is like how much would it cost to make a brand new one like this today, right? More or less like that. Commodities, make sure you know the difference between contango and backwardation. That's probably has, backwardation is when the future contracts are lower than the spot price. And contango is when the future contract price is higher than the spot price. So it's important. There you go. Contango and backwardation. The price of a commodity futures, make sure you understand that. There's no change from last year. So, okay, is the spot price plus storage cost minus the convenience yield. Okay, that's how much you paid for the future price on commodities. Okay. Understand what the raw yield is when you get out of a contract and you just get out of this contract and get in another contract right away. So you roll into another contract. The idea is that you get out of this contract and you get in another one at a lower price. So you keep rolling and rolling. That's the raw yield. Collateral yield is the money you get if you have any collateral, right? Say money or the asset itself, right? That you can get some extra cash for that. Investment in infrastructure and other alternative investments I found very difficult to be there, but I put it here just in case, okay? Because if it's a question, there was you're not going to tell me obviously, but hypothetically, there was a question about infrastructure. Well, great. So I kind of anticipating that I covered here. All right, friend, last module is portfolio management, okay? No change, no great big change here. So again, the overview of the portfolio management, make sure you know the 3 steps: the planning, the execution, and the feedback steps. The type of investors out there. What is the difference between an open-end and a closed-end fund? Okay, if you don't know, review that, okay, because could be questions on that, okay. I don't know which questions you're going to face, but I'm expecting one-line questions, right? And if it's one-line question, that could be there, right? ETFs, exchange trading funds, is a full reading, one reading alone on level 2. So I think it's important to know what it is. Okay, so make sure that you know what the exchange trading funds are, how they are traded, and just explain. Okay, all right. Learning module 2 and learning module 3, okay, of portfolio management. Okay, it's about risk and return. Risk and return part 1, risk and return part 2. Okay, so here we're going to talk about all the measurements of risk and return of portfolios. Okay, so again, I don't know if you remember that formula here, but that's the portfolio to risky assets, right? The standard deviation is the square root of the weights multiplied by the risks in conjunction of the covariance or the correlation. Okay, this is an important formula to remember. The risk of a portfolio of 2 assets. Another thing that's important to remember is if your portfolio has a lot of assets, has many assets, then the risk of the portfolio of many assets is going to be given by this equation here. Variance divided by n plus n minus 1 divided by n times the correlation. Okay? And so what happens is if n becomes big, this first term disappears, and the second term tends to 1. So we can say that the risk of the portfolio equals the covariance or correlation of the assets of the portfolio. Just so maybe something that you want to just know, right, and explain. Make sure that you know the difference between the capital allocation line, and the capital market line and the security market line. Okay? Capital allocation line, each individual would have one depending on their risk averse or not. Capital market line is a specific allocation line that takes total risk in consideration and measures the average risk investor. And SML, or security market line, is similar to the capital market line, except that does not take total risk in consideration. It takes only the undiversifiable risk, the systematic risk measured by beta. So SML, the security market line, uses beta as the risk measurement. And the CML, the capital market line, uses the Sharpe ratio, uses the standard deviation, which is a measure of total risk. Standard deviation measures total risk, and beta measures only the systematic risk. All right, let's see if there's anything else. A capital allocation line, capital market line. No, that's good. All right, so let's see. All right, so just a little pause here because I think I have one more reading that I want to address here for you, and that's it. Okay, so let me take a look. Yeah, I think that one will do it. All right, there we go. Good, friends. So again, we're approaching here to the end, so there's only one more thing to go over, right? Very small, that I'm going to show to you in a second. But again, it's a heavy content. So again, I try to show the approach on the new readings. The new readings are very theoretical, very conceptual. So the addition of more calculation into level 1, I don't think it was the case. Okay. What was the case was really the concepts, the definitions, and all of those external components that were added, but not much on calculations. Not much calculation was added. All right, let me see if I can show this to you. Excuse me. 1 second. Right there. All right, let me pass it here for you. Good. So let's see if you've seen that, right? I'm trying to kind of address here more the risk and return. So let's just talk about here the efficient frontier. Make sure you remember how to do that. What is the efficient frontier? Is where they line all the portfolios that have some kind of risk and return, right? That keep growing. The more risk, the more return, the more risk. Then they line on that curve. Any portfolio below that curve are inefficient portfolios. That's the case that you see here. Efficient frontier and the inefficient frontier. And when you link the risk-free rate to the portfolio that's in that line, then you get your allocation line, right? That's a line, okay? All right. Beta is a measure of systematic risk, and the standard deviation is the measure of total risk. I think that's important to mention, okay? Let me see. Here explain the capital market line and the security market line. Couple questions that could be there, like what is the slope, okay, of the call of the capital allocation line? Is the Sharpe ratio? What is the slope of the SML? Is the beta? Okay, so that could be questions there, the slope of those curves. Okay, systematic and non-systematic, I think we know. Estimation of beta, just know how to do it, is regression. You have to do a regression on the volatility or the variation of the returns, and then you can measure the beta. So you measure you compare the returns of the stock with the return of the market. In those variations, you kind of do a regression and you can estimate beta that way. Okay. Those ones are more level 2 and 3, right? The market model and the portfolio that you have to use it. So this is just for your information. If you're more interested into knowing that, what is the multi-factor models, single-factor models that we use to predict the return or expected return in portfolio management. Okay? All right. So those are almost in the end. I have, I think, one more here. All right, CAPM, assumptions of CAPM, okay? The capital asset pricing model. I think it's important for you to give a little review. What are investors are all risk averse. They like to maximize the utility. They are rational, right? They use the risk-free rate. So all of those assumptions are important because we never know which kind of question they could create out of that. Okay. All right. So I think that's it. I have one more. Let's see. I think I have one more here for you that I'm gonna put on queue for you, and then we finish. Right? We're almost done here. There you go. Good. There we go. There we go. One more, and there you go. Perfect. And we're gonna translate that for you. Oh, not that. Perfect. All right, friends, so let's see. Okay. Perfect, there you go. So right now we have some kind of more theories here on the portfolio management, but I want to focus on the last two readings that you need to know. Portfolio planning, the steps involved on portfolio planning, it's important. Risk, return, liquidity. And risk management, that suffered a little alteration, very little update on the risk management. So make sure that you're comfortable with risk governance, identification, infrastructure, define the policies, right? The risk monitoring. Make sure that you're very comfortable with those terminology, because since the reading was updated, we never know if the question could be from there. Okay? Measuring, modifying the risks, right? Where is the orange of the risk? Which kind of risk are we talking about here? It's involved in this scenario, right? If we have a portfolio of fixed income, we have different risks. You have a portfolio of commodities, a portfolio of equity, right? Methods of risk modification, prevention, acceptance, transfer. Transferring the risk is like credit default swaps. I buy insurance, or I transfer my risk to someone. And how do we measure the risk? Beta, standard deviation, and value at risk, VAR. Make sure that the VAR, you know the definition, but not necessarily that you need to know how to calculate VAR for level 1. Level 2, yes. Level 2, value at risk is going to be big. Level 1, maybe just knowing what it is. Okay. I'm going to finish with technical analysis. Again, that could be a question. Actually, I'm going to finish with fintech. That's coming after that. But technical analysis could be a question. So what do I predict that would be there? Is the type of charts and what indicates. So it's a momentum indicator, right? Or is a pattern indicator. What does a head and shoulder means? What does an inverse head and shoulder means? What is a double, triple pick? Triangles and rectangles, the cup handle, the coffee cups shapes that they have. So take a look on all of them, because you never know. Okay? If one question will be there. They might even give you a graph and say, what's going to happen according to technology? The stock's going to go up, the stock's going to go down, or nothing, right? So there you go. That's a nice coffee cup here for you, okay? That's the shape, okay? So that one is an indication that the stock is going to go down, okay? Look at that. That's again another cup being formed there, okay? So those are indicators. Technical indicators, right? Bollinger Bands, what they are, the moving average, patterns, momentums, all of those. There's no change on this reading. So therefore, it's the same content. Maybe one question could show up from here. Momentum oscillators, stochastic oscillators, okay? Make sure that you are comfortable with that. Elliott wave theory, never know, right? Market waves follow patterns that are ratios of the numbers in the Fibonacci sequence. If you don't know Fibonacci sequence, it's one of those sequences. It starts 0, 1, 1, then 2, 3, 5, 8, and it goes like in a spiral. So if you're curious to see how the Fibonacci sequence works, there's tons of videos out there for this. All right, FinTech is my last one, okay? I have not mentioned behavior bias, because behavior bias, number one, you just need to memorize the type of bias and see the implications of each one. And behavior bias is going to be big on level 3. Maybe one question of behavior bias on your exam. So what my opinion is, take a look on the bias, the list, loss aversion, right? You call representativeness, like availability bias, all those bias, and make sure that you understand what they mean and how to fix it or mitigate each one. I think that will be enough for behavioral bias. And FinTech, friends, is just like, it's a new topic, not new for this exam, but relatively new in terms of exams. It's just anything related to the algorithms, the high-speed trading, big data. This is going to be big on level 2. You're going to have one entire reading of big data and data analysis on level 2, right? Under QM, not even on portfolio management. It's going to be under QM on level 2. So understand what big data is. Level 1 is only understanding and understanding and explaining, okay? Artificial intelligence, machine learning. Again, you're going to have an entire reading of machine learning on level 2. So what is the probability that's going to be on level 1? I don't know. Maybe not a high probability, right? Maybe a small probability that you're going to have behavioral bias, a small probability that you're going to have FinTech, because on level 2, the probability is much higher for FinTech, big data, machine learning, and on level 3, the probability for behavioral bias is almost 100% certainty that you're going to get questions of behavioral bias there. So that's why I did not cover that much, also for the sake of time, because I went way over the time that I had planned here for today. I think that's it. Let's see. That's nothing else. Right. So I'm going to stay here. I want to say good luck to those that are going to do the exam next week. I know the exam is going to start next week, so good luck on that. Okay. Do the best you can, obviously, right? Be ready for conceptual questions. That's what I'm predicting. That's going to be more and more often that you're going to see. Probably like 75% of the questions are going to be conceptual, maybe 25, 30% calculation. Okay. Make sure that you do new readings, go over those new learning modules, go over the learning outcomes, right? Do the examples, do all the questions at the end of the chapters, do the ecosystem, right? And do as many mock exams as you can possibly do. Right? I think that's it, friends. So I'm going to finish here. I thank you, all of you that stays until now. I know not many. I know a lot of you tried at the beginning, but again, it was a longer than expected, but I hope it was helpful. For those that didn't have the opportunity to to stay until the end with me, well, this video is going to be posted. I'm going to be sending the link, so you're going to be able to watch it at another time. Okay, I am done. Thank you for watching. Take care.